Chapter 2953. Mo Lian's eyes darkened as she looked at Mo Shikang. With a wave of her hand, the four ghostly shadows quickly disappeared. The crowd could not help but rub their eyes. If it were not for the faint trace of blood at the corner of Mo Shikang's mouth, they would have thought that their eyes were playing tricks on them. The four of them disappeared as quickly as they appeared. If it were not for the fact that they had been staring at the scene, they would not have been able to catch a glimpse of the four figures in the blink of an eye. Has Royal Prince Xing steeled his heart to become enemies with us husband and wife? Mo Lian's lips curled up in a mocking sneer. Mo Shikang's cold face was filled with anger. He could not help but cough up a small mouthful of blood. Su Shihua's eyes flashed. He scrambled to his brother's back and exclaimed, "Big brother." Damn it. Even his brother was not a match for the four shadow guards. Who were they? Among the many people present, probably only King Jing, Mo Shikang, knew who these four people were. Not only did the emperor send the purple forest guards to the crown prince, but he also secretly rewarded the Hades court guards. That was not all. The emperor's shadow guards, the most elite of the Hades court guards, had four of them by the crown prince's side. The emperor's shadow guards were legendary. Every one of them was at least mystique venerable rank and above. They were the strongest transcendent god shadow guards. It was obvious how important this son of his was to the emperor. If it wasn't for the crown prince's gentle wave of his hand, Mo Shikang's life would have been lost at the imperial school. Mo Shikang could not help but laugh bitterly. He turned his head and glared at his brother, Su Shihua. His two sisters-in-law were too domineering. In the imperial city, not everything could be covered by Mo Shikang. Now that his brother had kicked the iron plate known as the crown princess, he did not know if he regretted it now. What Mo Shikang did not know was why Su Shihua regretted it. He was full of hatred. You cheated. Su Shihua reacted. He hid behind his brother and pointed a trembling finger in the direction of the little crown princess. You are not a little level 3 spiritual master. As soon as these words were spoken, there was an uproar all around. At first, everyone also felt that something was off. Now that Su Shihua had pointed it out, everyone wanted to slap their thighs and shout, "Yes!" How was this the fighting ability of a third-rank spirit master? What kind of rank 3 spirit master could smash a portion of a rank 15 great spirit master's spirit armor with a single swing of his axe? Wasn't this a joke? Everyone's gazes fell on Arbor in confusion. Arbor expressionlessly looked at Mo Shikang and his brother. His gaze coldly fell on Su Shihua. When this little girl emitted cold air, she was like a small moving ice sculpture. There was no trace of a person in her eyes at all. Everyone present couldn't help but shudder at the sight of such a young lady. Clang! The long sword was thrown to the ground by her, making a soft and crisp sound. Kill yourself. Everyone stared at her, dumbfounded. They thought that after Mo Shikang blocked the attack for his brother and got injured, this matter should be over. Who would have thought this was not over? Mo Shikang could not help but tremble in anger. At this time, he was still holding the death-free gold medallion issued by the great emperor, but now he only felt that the death-free gold medallion was very hot. Today will be the 10th chapter. First 2 chapters. After the 4 drip, he should be home at 3 o'clock. Calculating the time, it should be around 12 o'clock in the evening. Continue with the 8th chapter. Long wait, Mr. Author, are you feeling better? Chapter 2954. In front of the little crown princess, this death-free gold medallion given by the great emperor was of no use at all. The young crown prince consort's attitude was clearly stated. She wanted Su Shihua to commit suicide and let him know that not everyone's place could be so easily provoked. Many times, his big brother might not be able to protect him for a lifetime. Looking at the long sword that was lying quietly on the ground with a faint green light flowing around it, Shikong's face turned purple with anger. Big brother, big brother. Su Shihua was a little panicked. He secretly glanced at the little crown princess's cold face, then hurriedly crawled forward and hugged his big brother's trousers. Big brother, save me, big brother. How could this crown princess be so difficult to deal with? His big brother had already blocked the attack of the 4 hidden guards for him. His big brother had even vomited blood. What else did she want? And the few girls who originally came to watch the show with laughter also had ugly expressions. They were all junior brother Su's admirers and pursuers before. After all, with Su Shihua's family background as the younger brother of King Jing, coupled with his outstanding talent and cultivation, many female disciples in the academy had taken a fancy to him the moment he appeared. The Su Shihua that the girls usually saw was naturally elegant and confident. How could he be as cowardly as he was now, and even hugging his big brother Shikong's leg and crying? The girls' expressions changed at the same time. They instinctively felt that they were really blind in the past. They actually wanted to hook up with this kind of person. Crown Princess. Shikong took a deep breath and raised his hand to press his frowning brows. My brother acted rashly in this matter. But what should be punished has been punished, and what should be beaten has been beaten. Crown Princess, if you continue to be so overbearing, isn't it a little inexcusable? Shikong. The young crown prince consort had a cold expression on her face, so she directly called her by her full name. I gave you face time and time again because of Lien's mother. Don't think that your face is big enough to be able to point fingers in front of me time and time again. Shikong only felt that his heart was slightly stifled. I gave you face and called you brother King Jing. I didn't give you face. What can you do? The little crown princess kicked the long sword on the ground. I must kill Su Shihua today. Her ferocious gaze landed coldly on Shikong. She instantly turned hostile and said ruthlessly, it's useless for anyone to stop me. Who dares to stop me? Shikong slightly clenched his fists after hearing Shikong shout. The scene became very stiff in an instant. Everyone was baffled and stood there in silence. Even the onlookers felt the cold wind blowing and couldn't help but take a few steps back. Perhaps even Lady Qiao Qiao herself did not realize that once she was truly angered, everyone would become listless. Even Qi Xianxian and the others who were familiar with her were trembling in fear and did not dare to open their mouths if she wanted to slaughter Su Shihua. Then Su Shihua would have to lie down and obediently wait to be slaughtered. For a moment, the entire courtyard fell into an awkward silence. Holy Sun Mi Yen is here. Outside the crowd, there came a small rustling murmur. Holy Sun Mi Yen, who was dressed in a holy white robe and cold and handsome, walked straight out from the middle of the separated crowd. Behind him were several priests in the same white robes, each holding a short walking stick in their hands. Everyone bowed to the holy son of the temple. Mi Yan's gaze landed coldly on Arbor. You can't kill him. Chapter 2955. He has already obtained the quota to go to the Sun-Moon Mystery Realm this time. From the moment he received the token to go to the Sun-Moon Mystery Realm, he received the protection of our Sun-Moon Temple. Holy Sun Mi Yen slowly raised a hand and said coldly, before we set off for the Sun-Moon Mystery Realm, he can't die. Arbor glanced at the Holy Sun, and her expressionless face instantly turned cold. Holy Sun Mi Yen found that the little girl in front of him, whose eyes were as calm as a dry well, were like 2 ice beads in a cold pool, slipping into a black abyss little by little. Heartless, indifferent, pitch black, and harsh. There was almost no light in her eyes. Why? In her previous life, any random cat or dog, who was unhappy with her and wanted to step on her a few times, could find trouble with her without a word. Why? When she fought back, there would always be someone who appeared in front of those weak people with the face of a righteous messenger, looking at her with accusatory eyes, accusing her of being vicious and cruel. Was it her fault? Was it all her fault? She deserved to be suppressed, deserved to be found trouble with. She fought back and beat the other party like a dog. Was it her fault? When she was the weak party, which of these strong people's relatives and friends would sympathize with her and help her? It was simply ridiculous. Jojo, what are you thinking? Mo Lien immediately realized that his little wife's state was not right. He hurriedly went forward and pulled her back to his side, patting her back to comfort her. Don't let your imagination run wild, Jojo. Leave this matter to me, okay? He lifted her little chin with one hand, making her silent eyes meet his. Her body was warm, as if the ice and snow around her had melted a lot. Arbor came back to her senses and looked up at Mo Lien. Mo Lien looked at her clear eyes, which were as clear as water. His slender figure was faintly rippling. His heart slightly relaxed, and he calmly called out, "Little Seven. Roar," after a fierce dragon roar. Everyone felt a golden light suddenly appear in front of their eyes, which was exceptionally dazzling. After adapting to the glaring golden light with great difficulty, he slowly opened his eyes. A coiled golden dragon gently swept its tail and rolled up Su Shihua, who was hiding behind Mo Shikang, and threw him out. Su Shihua was flung to the opposite fence by a terrifying force of inertia, and a part of the fence collapsed with a loud crack. He collapsed to the ground in a daze and spat out a mouthful of blood. He looked at Mo Lien and Qiao Mu across from him with an increasingly horrified expression. Were these two monsters? He had already admitted defeat, so why did they still want to kill him? To put it bluntly, there wasn't any deep enmity between them. It was just him who was blind and came to find trouble with the little stoic. Now that he had been beaten to the point of vomiting blood and had been taught a lesson to the point where he had lost all face, why was he still unwilling to let him go? Why didn't this couple follow the routine? Mo Lien ordered coldly, "Kill him, Little Seven." This damned guy actually angered his Jojo to this extent, to the point where she was about to enter a demonic state again. Even death could not wipe out his crimes. The golden dragon immediately raised its head and roared angrily. A scorching red flame followed the soil under its feet and burned toward Su Shihua. Don't kill me, don't kill Big Brother, save me, Big Brother. Chapter 2956. Su Shihua's eyes were filled with horror. He got up on all fours and desperately ran out of the bamboo fence. Boom! The golden red flame was like a lion spitting fire. It moved forward rapidly and completely engulfed Su Shihua's body in an instant. The seventh yen circled in the air and roared angrily. Then, it turned into a golden pillar of light and sank into the crown prince's raised right hand. Ah hua! Mo Shikang finally reacted and hurriedly ran out of the bamboo fence. After a while, he came back with charcoal, whose head was crooked and whose body had been burned to a pulp. His eyes were filled with anger. He tightly grasped his brother's body and shouted angrily, "Crown Prince! If I want to kill him, who dares to stop me?" Prince Mo threw a cold look at Mo Shikang and said in a cold voice, "You can put this account on me. Your younger brother was killed by Gudu, the person I want to kill. If I say he won't live past midnight tonight, he will never be able to see the morning light of tomorrow." Everyone's hearts shrank and they all took a step back. Especially those who came with the intention of watching the fun. At this moment, they really wanted to slap themselves. Who asked you to come and watch the fun? Who asked you to court death? Now the Crown Prince of Shenzhou and King Zheng were sworn brothers who were about to fight. Maybe the Crown Prince's anger had nowhere to vent and would be directed at them. Be a good King Jing. Mo Lien threw down this sentence and directly reached out to pick up Arbor, who had his head lowered. Then he turned and walked out of the door. After a few steps, he suddenly stopped and turned his head to glare at Mentor Ma and the others who were standing at the door. They were all shocked by his sharp gaze. Cancel my leave. Okay, cancel my leave, cancel my leave. I'll cancel it right away. Mentor Ma replied repeatedly and then wished he could slap himself. Was this the attitude of a mentor when talking to a student? He almost couldn't bear to look at this fucking fawning look. Holy Sun Mi Yen was so infuriated that one Buddha ascended to the heavens and 2 Buddhas left his body. Time and time again, he realized that his words were completely useless in front of Mo Lien and Arbor. This couple did not care about him at all. A little priest behind him said weakly, Lord Holy Sun, actually, we should just watch the show. There's no need to interfere. The little priest bit the words into his own mouth and couldn't say it. Because Holy Sun Mi Yen turned around and punched his head ferociously as he roared, Shut up. The little priest cried silently in his heart. He felt that he was really too pitiful. He was clearly advising Lord Holy Sun not to make any more mistakes. Who would have thought that he would end up in such a miserable state? Holy Sun Mi Yen came and left quickly, mainly because he felt that he didn't have the face to continue being watched here. As for the Prince of Jing, Mo Shikang, he lowered his head to look at his dying younger brother, who was charred black in his arms. His complexion was ghastly pale, and Mo Lien's parting words kept echoing in the depths of his mind. Be a good King Jing. Be a good King Jing. The threat in her words was so strong that it almost gushed out. Mo Shikang reached out and clenched his fists, and his breathing quickened. Chapter 2957. The Crown Prince meant that if he continued to court death, he would think of a way to remove him from the position of King Jing. Was he so much of an eyesore to the Crown Prince? Mo Shikang regained his senses and quickly ran towards the direction of the alchemy hole. Su Shihua was still alive. He could save him. He could definitely save him if his parents knew that Hua Di had died in the royal school like this. He wondered if they would cry until a hole appeared in the sky. When Mo Shikang thought of this, he couldn't help but secretly shudder. If Hua Di really died like this, then King Zheng's residence would never have a day of peace. Let's not talk about how King Jing, Mo Shikang, would go to the alchemy hall to beg the alchemists to save his brother. When Mo Lien carried his wife back to the room in the Donglin court, he kicked the door open and pulled his wife onto his lap. Without any explanation, he kissed her. He kissed the little girl until her somewhat dazed and unfocused eyes gradually became a little more focused. 2 red clouds quickly flew up on her small face. Only then did he slightly release the restraint, allowing her to take advantage of the situation to gasp for breath. When did they return to the court? Sir Jojo frowned and raised his little hand to block a certain someone's lips. What are you doing? Kissing my own wife, isn't it a matter of course? Mo Lien's handsome face was taut as he said seriously. Sir Jojo glanced at him and snorted. He would never admit that he almost suffocated to death just now. Why did you come back? It was all his fault that he didn't accompany her to cancel her leave. Everything was not going well. I was looking for the shadow guards to ask something. Before Sir Chiao Chiao could open her mouth to ask, Crown Prince Mo, upholding his wife's words as the truth of the heavens, spilled the beans and confessed everything in full detail. The night before we went to Yunxia Peak, I arranged for them to do something at Xia Qi Garden. I left a trace of my soul and went to find Ming Yasi to fight that night. I asked them to cooperate with me. Yeah. In the end, he beat up Ming Ya so badly that he'll probably have to rest in bed for 2 to 3 days. You probably won't be seeing him for the next few days. Jojo stared at the man in front of him with his mouth agape. You beat him up? Yes. Mo Lien nodded and said with a look of disgust, it's a pity that this matter can only be carried out in secret. Even if we beat him up, we can't publicize it. Otherwise, not only will he suffer physical pain, his reputation will also be tarnished. The little fellow blinked his eyes and glanced at his exceptionally serious husband. He raised his little hand and touched his face. She suddenly reached out and hugged him, her little head swaying on his shoulder. Mo Lien, sometimes I wonder, what would I have done if I hadn't met you in this lifetime? She couldn't even think about it now. Just thinking about it made her heart ache. It felt like they had missed each other like this in their previous lives. Mo Lien was stunned. He hugged her tightly in his arms and slid his palm gently on her back. Even if it's 10,000 miles away, even if it's the 9 heavens, even if it's the Yellow Springs, it's still impossible to separate us. How is it possible that we haven't met? It's impossible. He hugged her soft body tightly and whispered in her ear. Impossible, Jojo murmured softly. She rested her head on his shoulder and remained silent for a long time. Jojo, can you promise me something? Mo Lien suddenly reached out and held her little face. He looked at her with a serious expression, his eyes shining brightly. Chapter 29:58. In the future, when you feel that the night is coming and you can't see any stars, just look at me, okay? Arbor wanted to laugh, but looking at his serious expression, she couldn't laugh at all. Even when I'm not by your side, you can look at the star I gave you. He carelessly touched the bottom of her neck and took out the little star from her collar, letting her hold it in her hand. Jojo. He sighed softly and rested his forehead on her sweaty little head. I don't know what kind of suffering and torture you've experienced in the past. Maybe I'm powerless to change it. But I want you to remember one thing. In the future, no matter how dark the night is or how long the road is, you'll have me by your side. No matter what you want to do, just do it. He raised his hand and touched her little face. I'll support you with all my strength. Arbor pursed her little lips, tilted her little head, and burrowed into his embrace. Mo Lien, let's have a little Mo Lien. I think he'll be like you in the future. He'll be cute when he's young, sensible when he's older, and know how to dote on his mother. That's me. I think that's pretty good too. When the time comes, there'll be another person to dote on me. Sir Jojo thought so, but he didn't continue. After all, he was a jealous lotus. It was possible that he would even be jealous of his son. Prince Mo's hand, which was holding his little wife, instantly froze. He looked down. He saw his little beauty's little face under the flickering candlelight, swaying as if she wanted to say something. It was so captivating. It caused his originally pure mind to explode with a loud bang. It transformed into a colorful, enchanting, and gentle scenery. This was intolerable. He originally thought that since his little wife was still young, he would grit his teeth and endure it. When little Gwizzy grew up, he would swallow her in one gulp. He didn't expect his wife to ask for it herself. If he could still endure it, he wouldn't be human. Wife, whatever you say is right. Prince Mo carried his wife up and quickly moved to the side of the bed. Do you want to have a drink first? Arbor had the urge to laugh. Why did she feel that her husband was so nervous that even his hands and feet were a little choppy? Do you want a drink to boost your courage? Mo Lien, how could he say that? He looked at his wife pitifully. After a while, he said, I'm not scared. Let's blow out the light. Mo Lien says, and the lights on the other end. Bang! 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 A series of knocks sounded from outside. Crown Prince Mo cursed inwardly. Just as her fingers were about to button up her coat, she heard the pounding on the door become louder and louder. Bang 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 bang. Bang 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 bang. Arbor silently lowered her little head. Prince Mo glanced at his little wife and said speechlessly, "Baby, don't think that I can't see you snickering just because you're lowering your head." Arbor looked up. The smile on her face had already widened. This caused Crown Prince Mo's hand, which was holding the buttons of his outer robe, to pause slightly. Jojo. The Crown Prince was in a good mood now. He suddenly felt that the guy outside who was pounding on the door wasn't so annoying anymore. He moved to her side, took her little hand with a smile, and kissed it hard. Chapter 29:59. Nothing could compare to his Jojo's smile, which made people feel comfortable. Crown Prince Mo beamed as he gazed at his wifey. He leaned close to her and whispered, "How regretful, wifey. Looking at the time, we won't be able to make little Mo Lien today." The audacious Lord Xiao Xiao was actually blushing because of a few words from him. She suddenly felt that she should tease him back a little. But before she could do anything, bang! The people outside kicked the door open and rushed in one after another. "Jojo, are you all right? Jojo." Qi Xianxian and the rest froze at the door. Looking at Crown Prince Mo and Sir Chao Chao, who were sitting in a row on the edge of the bed, their large hands clasped together as they gazed at each other, they felt like they had ruined someone else's happy occasion by foolishly barging in. Xiao Mu suppressed the smile on her lips and did her best to maintain an expressionless stoic face. "What could happen to me? We've lost face in the academy," Little Fatty exclaimed. "We were thinking, if we lost you as well." When the little fatty met Crown Prince Mo's gaze, he suddenly couldn't continue speaking. Cough cough. Actually, they were worried about Jojo. Jojo didn't look well just now and they were all worried to death. Now that they saw that the little girl's face was expressionless, but she was obviously much more energetic than before, they were relieved. Prince Mo was indeed worthy of his name. Luckily, he was here and managed to coax Miss Chow back. Duan Muqing looked at the two of them deeply and smiled. "Since Jojo is fine, let's gather at the plaza." Plaza. Something happened in the academy. Qi Xianxian wanted to walk up and hold Jojo's small arm, but seeing Prince Mo standing beside Jojo, she didn't dare to walk over. Sir Jojo jumped off the bed and held Mo Lien's hand as they walked towards the door. "What happened?" "The academy is embarrassed." "Embarrassed?" That poor Qin Xiu is missing. His Highness Ming Bao from Ming Province is also missing." Everyone talked as they walked towards the plaza. When they arrived, they realized that the plaza was already surrounded by a large group of people. When Principal Yun and a group of teachers arrived, everyone silently shut their mouths and looked up at Principal Yun and his group walking up the stairs. The principal frowned deeply and looked at the students. He said loudly, "I believe everyone knows what happened in the academy. Just now, the academy sent people to search the inner city but didn't find any traces of the two. I regret to inform you that student Qin Xiu and Ming Bao should have been abducted by unknown people." The academy square immediately went into an uproar. Everyone was whispering to each other, and they couldn't stop themselves from getting excited. "Principal, did someone sneak into our academy and abduct our students?" The hothead who spoke asked the question on everyone's mind. If someone was really able to sneak into the royal school and abduct them, then this enemy shouldn't be an ordinary person. His or her cultivation should be on par with Principal Yun's. Principal Yun looked at the student who asked the question and shook his head. "What we can confirm now is that the two students got lost in the inner city." Chapter 29:60. Now, the Academy has issued an emergency level 4 mission. We're calling for everyone to go out and search for them. Those who can find their 2 classmates in 3 days will be able to go to the mission center to collect the mission points. A burly man could not help but laugh when he heard this. We're losing people from the Divine Continent and the Underworld region. Don't tell me they'll all be found by us from the Zhangzhou. The Crown Prince of the Zhangzhou, Rongli, could not help but frown as he glared at Ba Shu. This Ba Shu was loyal enough, but sometimes he seemed a little stupid. At this time, it was best not to speak, but he had to open his mouth to provoke the students from the Divine Continent and the Underworld region. As expected, Ba Shu's words immediately led to a war of words. Seeing that things were not going well, Principal Yun immediately raised his hands and gestured for everyone to keep quiet. Everyone quietly quieted down and focused their attention on Principal Yun. This emergency mission requires everyone to work together to complete it. After all, we've already sent so many people out, but in the inner city, it was like looking for a needle in a haystack. We found nothing. The purpose of this mission is to motivate all the students from the 3 continents to take the initiative and participate. We hope that you can take this mission seriously. After all, since you've entered the academy, your status is only that of a student. There's no distinction between rich and poor. Today, you may be able to ignore your classmates going missing, or even losing their lives, but you don't know when this kind of tragedy will befall you. If you extend a helping hand to others today, you'll receive help from others in the future. I hope you understand. Yes. The group of students shouted in unison. Even if they were not going for the mission points, they could not let others step on the heads of the royal school students and behave atrociously. Qin Cultivator's student went to the inner city to buy zither strings. Ming Bao seemed to be going to the inner city to buy something too. Both of them went missing on the same day. Could they have been kidnapped by the same person? The students started to discuss enthusiastically as they discussed forming teams to search for the 2 students in the inner city. Qi Xianxian glanced at Arbor. Jojo, are we going? She knew that Jojo had never been on good terms with the Qin family. As for that Ming Bao, he did not have much contact with him either. However, since they had the same surname as Dark Yas, they were most likely from the same family. Arbor considered for a moment, then nodded and said, since it's a mission from the academy, then we'll take it and walk around the inner city. They were just doing their best. After all, the inner city was so big. One more patrol team wouldn't make much of a difference. Even if she didn't get along with the people from the Qin estate, there was nothing wrong with the academy assigning her a mission. Moreover, she had briefly interacted with that 5th young Master Qin in the medical field, so she knew that this person was very fussy and didn't want to have too much personal contact with him. However, this was only a mission. Since all the students had accepted the challenge, their Seikong Planet battle team wouldn't do that special treatment and would just accept the challenge. As for whether or not he could find it, that was another matter altogether. Qi Xianxian, on the other hand, was quite happy. She had accepted a mission and was going to take a stroll around the inner city. Who knows, maybe they would be lucky enough to meet these 2 students and complete a level 4 mission. How great would that be? Chapter 2961. How could Arbor know that the little lass was harboring this kind of hoping to get lucky mentality? After accepting the mission, they followed the large group of students and walked out of the academy. It was already dusk, and the oncoming wind was neither too fast nor too slow. Although it was a bit chilly, it wasn't bone-piercing cold. After all, they were about to enter April, and the season of blooming flowers was about to arrive. Arbor walked next to Mo Lian and felt the warmth in his palm as he held her hand. Mo Lian's physique was of the fire attribute, and she herself possessed a sacred fire. His hand was dry and warm all year round, so she especially liked it. Unlike her, her legs were always a bit cold, and when she was nervous, her palms would turn cold and damp, making her feel uncomfortable. Mo Lien reached out to pinch the little fellow's soft little face. Chow chow, how about we split into 3 teams to search the city since there are about 10 of us? Right, 3 to 4 people in a team. We have to move faster, and we should be able to search the inner city before nightfall. Qi Xianxian quickly nodded and said. Arbor glanced at the little lass and silently twitched his mouth. Xianxian shouldn't be having some strange thoughts, such as, perhaps our team can complete this level 4 mission, or, in terms of luck, I only believe in my JoJo, and so on. The little stoic opened her mouth. Xianxian, we're just out for a routine stroll. She didn't need to be so proactive. In any case, there were plenty of proactive people. There were at least several hundred people who wanted to save 5th young Master Qin from this abyss of suffering, one after the other. After all, the benefits of being on good terms with the Qin estate were innumerable. Qi Xianxian quickly said, Jojo, don't doubt luck. I keep feeling that we'll run into each other. Where did you get this absurd confidence from? Arbor cast her a speechless glance, then didn't bother to continue speaking. Qi Xianxian arranged for the teams to be split into 3 teams, purposely leaving Prince Mo and Arbor in one team. After receiving Crown Prince Mo's admiring gaze, she laughed heartily and ran off with her teammates. Arbor couldn't help but shake his head in amusement. He turned to Mo Lien and said, let's find a tea house and sit down. Whether or not he could find the zither cultivator and the underworld leopard was not that important to Arbor. In any case, if they were still in the inner city, they would definitely not be able to leave for the time being. After all, the dean had ordered the city to be sealed the moment the 2 students were confirmed to be missing. Right now, not to mention a person, even a fly would not be able to fly out of Wind Thunder City. Oh no, oh no. A cannibalistic barrier appeared at the end of West Street again and swallowed the children. A loud voice exploded in their ears. They saw that the passers-by and the uncles and aunties who had set up their stalls all raised their carrying poles and rushed towards this person with sticks in their hands. What? Where is it? Where is it? Take us there. Everyone, be careful. This man-eating enchantment was very fierce. We've already gone to Ethereal Peak to ask Principal Yun for help. As long as Principal Yun is willing to descend the mountain, he will definitely be able to get rid of this vile creature. Right, there must be a demon causing mischief. It can't be a ghost, right? No matter who it is, in any case, we must eradicate it completely this time. Master Silver, Little 4 is nearby. Chocho's sudden words made Arbor's brows twitch uncontrollably. What man-eating enchantment, it couldn't have been that little rascal's doing, right? Today ended at 10 o'clock p.m. Fragmented Dreams. Chapter 2962. Sir Jojo hurriedly tugged at her husband's hand. Lien, let's also go over and take a look. Mo Lien nodded and looked at her in confusion. What is it? Seeing the little fellow's serious expression, it seemed like something rather important had happened. Everything was fine just now. To put it bluntly, the disappearance of that fellow hell leopard and 5th Qin didn't have much to do with them, the little girl said expressionlessly. Previously, I found Chocho's treat seed fragment Little 4 in the heaven-level testing steel on Main Academy Street. Arbor took a deep breath. It ran away. Later, because there were too many things to do, she didn't remember to go look for this little fellow. She didn't expect it to stir up trouble in the inner city. It really deserved a beating. Mo Lien couldn't help but laugh. The cannibalistic inner world that those city residents were talking about just now. It should be its doing. The little girl nodded her little head resentfully. This little fellow was seriously too mischievous. The 2 hurried in the direction of West Main Street as they spoke. There were already quite a few people standing there. Older brothers and uncles carrying hose followed the crowd as they searched for the missing child. But how could a few dozen trifling ordinary people detect something like a barrier? When Arbor arrived at West Main Street, she also sensed a trace of familiar energy fluctuation. Knowing that it was the fragment Little Four playing tricks, she hurriedly tugged at Mo Lien's hand and pulled him into a detour into an alley. At this time, West Main Street had already attracted a large number of people. Many Royal Academy students also hurried over when they heard that something had happened here. Arbor didn't want to attract attention. This Little Four was so mischievous, so she had to take this little fellow away before anyone discovered it. The two entered the back alley and didn't sense anything special at first. But after walking for a short while, they both stopped and looked at each other. Although the surroundings don't seem to have changed, it's very obvious that we've already unknowingly walked into a barrier, Mo Lien said with a smile. Can't Cho-Cho sense the movement trajectory of fragments? Summon it out and lead the way. Xiao Mu nodded and summoned Cho-Cho. As soon as the little tray ant came out, it somersaulted twice and climbed onto Xiao Mu's shoulder before plopping down on its butt. It panted as it said, "Master, this matter is a bit difficult to handle." What is it? This fourth child must have developed some intelligence and has its own thoughts. The little tray ant drooped its black bean-like eyes in distress. It stretched out a branch and scratched its head in distress. What if it really doesn't want to return to its original position? The sapling glanced at the little Master Silver worriedly and muttered, "Cho-Cho can only grow into a towering tree if we gather all the missing fragments." When it said this, Cho-Cho looked up at the sky again and put on a sad but bright little tree face. Arbor was speechless for a while. He raised his hand and stroked the leaves on its head. It will come back. Hurry up and sense its location. Cho-Cho lifted 2 leaves and pointed in front. Arbor wanted to reach out and grab her husband's hand, but grabbed nothing. She couldn't help but be secretly alarmed. She turned her head and shouted, "Lien." Mo Lien was also annoyed at this time. He also wanted to grab his wifey's hand as he spoke, but didn't manage to do so. Only then did he realize that he had fallen into Little Four's trap. Chapter 2963. Looking around, he realized that he was no longer in the dark alley. Instead, there were many tall and lush trees growing around him. Suddenly, one of the tree vines that was hanging behind him moved. It moved very quickly, like a dancing black snake. With 2 whooshing sounds, it wrapped itself around Mo Lien's arm. Mo Lien raised the Raven Moon sword in her hand. She hesitated for a moment before slashing down. Within the tree shadow enchantment that Little Four had set up, if she destroyed it recklessly, it would definitely cause harm to Little Four. This tree seed fragment was a part of Little Ball. It would be bad if it was damaged, but if it wasn't, she wouldn't be able to leave for the time being. Mo Lien felt a headache coming on. Looking at the tree vines that were wantonly attacking her, she leapt and dodged. "Lien!" Sir Jojo quickly ran a few feet forward. His little face instantly darkened. "Little Four, come out." "Master, don't worry about the great Crown Prince. He will be fine." The great Crown Prince's martial prowess was no joke. If Little Four insisted on seeking death, Little Ball secretly ridiculed in its heart. It could only light a candle for him. When spring came next year, it would burn some paper at his grave. "Master, it's not far ahead. Chase!" With Little Ball's howl, Arbor inexplicably increased its speed and rushed towards the direction it was pointing at. From afar, they could only see a towering tree standing in front of them. Under the tree, there was a large hollowed-out lounge chair with golden flowers. On it lay a fat baby wearing a big red doo-doo. 17 or 18 children, ranging in age from 5 to 8 years old, were eagerly surrounding the chubby baby, serving him tea and water as they called out, "Your Majesty." "Great King, have a banana." "Great King, drink some water." "Don't choke." "Great King, are you hot? Do you want me to give you a fan or something?" As Arbor approached, he heard these children flattering the Great King. The corners of his mouth couldn't help but twitch. What was going on? She subconsciously glanced at the expressionless Cho-Cho from the corner of her eye. No emotion could be seen in Cho-Cho's two bean-like bright eyes. However, Arbor knew that Cho-Cho's heart must be crumbling right now. Cough. Arbor pulled the little tray ant off his shoulder and put it on his arm. "Cho-Cho, I didn't expect you to have such a dark heart. So you've always wanted to be the Great King of the mountain. Raise a group of little brothers and sisters to serve you. No wonder you enslaved Little Water and Little Earth. It turns out that you are subconsciously a great king of mountains." Several leaves rushed up to block Arbor's little mouth. Cho-Cho only felt that its small tree face was about to burst into flames. It was about to be angered to death by this brainless fat baby in front of it. What was wrong with Fragment Little 4? It created such a frightening barrier and kidnapped so many children from the city just to make these children its subordinates. Bandits. Bandits. Shameless. Cho-Cho couldn't help but curse at this brainless fragment in its heart. "Hey! Why aren't you kneeling in front of this great king?" The fat baby suddenly straightened up and spoke in a childish voice. Arbor had an inexplicable urge to burst out laughing. Fortunately, she was used to her stoic face, so she restrained her laughter. Chapter 2964. Kneel. Meet this great king. The chubby baby coiled his two short legs that resembled lotus roots and looked at Arbor seriously. His gaze landed on the sapling Cho-Cho's tanned face. "You still dare to pull a long face in front of this great king? You go up and pluck off the hair on his head." "Yes, great king." A wimpy child beside him immediately responded. He rolled up his sleeves and stomped up a few steps. Arbor's mouth twitched. She really didn't want to bully a baby. But the other person had already rolled up his sleeves to snatch Cho-Cho from her arm. If she didn't do anything, wouldn't she be too cowardly? Arbor expressionlessly picked up that wimpy child and watched him kick his legs in the air like a fish that suddenly lost its water supply and found it hard to breathe. Then, he burst into tears with a "wah." The little stoic's face instantly darkened, and her head swelled. The little fat child with the red doo-doo was infuriated, and he leaped down from the large recliner at once. His small, chubby feet were bare as he ran toward Xiao Mu, smacking his lips. The sapling Cho-Cho raised two leaves to cover its black beady eyes. It felt that the Fragment Little 4 in front of it was practically unbearable to look at. How could this guy be so stupid? He was actually butt naked. This child couldn't have been sealed inside the testing monolith for hundreds to thousands of years and turned stupid, right? "Woman, how dare you!" The chubby baby shouted as he looked up at Arbor with his arms akimbo. If this guy could grow a bit taller, perhaps he would be a bit more imposing. But now Arbor rolled his eyes and directly flung out a vine from his sleeve. He grabbed that wimpy child and hung him up like a dumpling before dragging him in front of him. "Where did you take my Lien? Hurry and let him out." The chubby baby widened his round black eyes and stared pitifully at Arbor. He then turned around to look at Cho-Cho and suddenly wailed, Big brother, save me, big brother." Cho-Cho speechlessly raised its hand to cover its eyes. Arbor reached out and flicked its chubby head. "Shut up. I think you've become bold, even daring to kidnap people. Don't you know that other people's families will worry when you kidnap them to play?" Arbor slapped its chubby paw twice in exasperation at its failure to meet his expectations. "How are you going to clean this up now?" "Big brother," Fragment number 4 said pitifully, can you ask this big sister to stop hitting me? Big big big. Call her master. Xiao Mu and Qiu Qiu roared at it one after another. Fragment number 4 lowered its head like a little quail. Before it could even open its mouth, it was already tearing up. Little mistress, what do you think we should do? Big brother, can you fuse me in later? Get to the point. Qiu Qiu roared at it with great vigor. I don't have any ill intentions towards them, fragment number 4 stuttered. Fragment number 4 stuttered. Tears fell from his eyes as he howled miserably, I am madam. I really want to find someone to play with me for a while. I didn't harm them. I even gave them good food and drinks. But you still can't kidnap them, Arbor glared at it in annoyance. Before he could continue lecturing it, he frowned slightly. Chapter 2965. In the next instant, the little monk who was making a fuss was released. Once the little baldy was released, he ran to the little fat boy with the red undergarment and said, Amitba. He stretched out his white and tender hands and rubbed Fragment Little Four's head. Benefactor, this little monk understands you very well. Arbor was speechless. Actually, it's because you're too lonely that you did such a foolish thing. The little fat boy with the red undergarment on his butt sobbed and suddenly stopped crying. He raised his head and looked at the little monk who had a compassionate expression and was enveloped in Buddhist light. Little master. The little fat boy cried loudly and threw himself into the little monk's arms. The little monk sighed and said, the world is empty and bitter, and everything is impermanent. The past is gone, and people must always look to the future. Little benefactor, don't be too sad. Arbor pressed his aching head and carried the little monk over and placed him under the tree. He then carried the little fat boy with the red undergarment over and placed him under the tree as well. I beg of you, don't cry. Arbor pulled Qiu Qiu from his arm and placed him on the ground. He stared at fragment number 4 with a serious expression. Little 4, you knew who we were the moment you came out from the testing monument, right? Fragment Little 4 shivered and nodded his head timidly. The little brats around them were not going to let it go. They kept calling him a great king and wanted to rebel and attack Sir Jojo. What a joke, how could they let their great king lower his head and admit defeat in front of a girl? They had to fight. Arbor was speechless as he looked at the little brats who were swarming towards him. He couldn't hit them and couldn't be bothered to scold them. He simply controlled the dosage and sprinkled the sleeping powder on them, dong 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 dong. The little brats fell in a circle and the world finally quieted down. Arbor heaved a sigh of relief from the bottom of his heart. Fragment Little 4 looked at his little brothers nervously, then looked up at the little girl bitterly. Master Silver, what did you do to them? Miss Chiao had a good sense of propriety. The dosage of the sleeping powder was very light. At most, it would only make the children sleep for 15 minutes. It would not have any effect on their bodies. Therefore, if she wanted to do something, she had to do it within these 15 minutes. Otherwise, her head would explode again. Little 4, you must listen to me now. Immediately return to Paradise Planet with Qiu Qiu. Seeing that the chubby kid was about to cry again, Arbor pinched his chubby cheeks. No matter what you do, I will respect your decision. Since you've already gained sentience, you should have your own thoughts. But you have to think carefully. Arbor patted him on the head. If you don't return to your original body, you'll always be like this. You'll never grow up again. Without this fragment, Little 4 was only missing a small part to him. His growth would be slower in the future. But this seed fragment, it would forever remain in the form of a child. It would be impossible for it to grow for thousands of years. Fragment Little 4 sobbed and said pitifully, I didn't think that I won't come back. I just want to play for a while more. After being accidentally sealed in the test monument in the middle of nowhere, Little Four had always wanted to come out. Chapter 2966. Once it escaped, its little mentality was that it didn't want to be fused with Big Brother so quickly. He really wanted to chase back the hundreds of years of time that had been sealed, and then find someone to play with it for a few days. Woo-woo, it was that simple. Arbor picked him up and flicked his little head. Alright, Chucho didn't say that it was going to fuse with you immediately. As for you, you can play for as long as you want, but you can't kidnap people anymore in the future. If you want to play with them, then work hard to become their little friends. Instead of using the methods of bandits to kidnap them. The little chubby child nodded his little head as if he understood. Where's my Lien? The little fellow's face was stiff as he asked without batting an eyelid. The little chubby child weakly pointed at his fingers. He's so bad, he almost chopped me to death. If this man hadn't stopped at the last moment, it would probably have been injured and unable to continue maintaining the barrier in front of it. Arbor and the little chubby child looked at each other. So. I threw him out before. Fragment Little Four said immediately. Threw him out of my bounded domain. Out far away. Out far away, at least he wouldn't be able to find him so quickly. What a scary guy. He now understood a little why that man suddenly stopped and didn't try to destroy his barrier. It must be because that man suddenly remembered that he and Big Brother were of the same bloodline. If he hurt him, he would hurt Big Brother, which would then affect his own little master. That terrifying man had only let him go for the sake of his little mistress. Arbor really wanted to smack this little fellow's butt, but he gritted his teeth and held it in. At the side, Chucho didn't care so much and directly pulled out a vine and smacked the little chubby child's butt. He snorted and said, "You're not too stupid. You guessed correctly. Crown Prince didn't attack you for Master's sake. Otherwise, with your small body, do you think you can withstand 3 moves from others? Hurry and return to Paradise Planet with me, don't cause trouble for Master anymore. Master still has to clean up this mess for you. You're really worrying people to death. After a few hundred years, you've grown old but not wise. Why are you so foolish?" The sapling activated its nagging mode and stretched out a branch to grab Fragment Little Four, pulling him back to Paradise Planet. Another branch stretched out and wrapped around the little monk's waist without warning, causing the little monk's mumbling of "this little monk can walk on his own" to disappear into the air. Arbor pressed his small head with a headache and glanced at the bear cubs lying on the ground. With a wave of his hand, he led the group of children out of the barrier and back into the alley. She flicked a pebble from her fingertips and it landed on the wall with a "paw" sound. Then she disappeared without a trace. Very quickly, the alley was filled with students from the royal school. The leader of the group was Wu Huanxiu, the beautiful princess. She saw a dozen children lying in the alley and couldn't help but cry out in surprise, "It's the children. Come and see. Is he your child?" His voice was like a candle that had been lit, instantly attracting all the citizens in the city. Meanwhile, the little stoic had already gone far away. Following the sapling's guidance, she chased in the direction of Mo Lien's aura. Just as she came out from behind the alley, she narrowly bumped into a coarse woman with a fierce-looking face. "I'm going to sleep, it's too late." Chapter 2967. The woman scowled and was about to curse, but when she looked up and saw her, it was as if she had suddenly seen a ghost. She hastily lowered her head and shrunk her neck as she walked towards the side door. When the woman stealthily walked to the door and closed it, she didn't forget to sneak a glance at Arbor. She was almost scared out of her wits by what she saw. She saw that Miss Chiao really was like a ghost as she stood in front of the side door. The woman's heart almost stopped from fright when she met Xiao Mu's cold and desolate eyes through the door crack that wasn't very wide. Bang! The woman forcefully closed the door with both hands and hastily fastened the latch. Afterwards, she panted heavily for air and subconsciously raised her sleeve to wipe the cold sweat on her forehead before slowly turning around. She then widened her eyes in horror as she looked at Arbor, who was standing in front of her and staring at her expressionlessly. Bang! The woman's legs turned to jelly from fright, and she leaned against the door, almost collapsing on the ground. Barely propping herself up, the woman trembled as she leaned against the door. She looked in horror at the little stoic in front of her and stammered, Miss, trespassing into other people's homes. What are you doing? You know me. The woman hurriedly shook her head like a rattledrum. You don't know me, but you look like you've seen a ghost. Arbor's eyes revealed this meaning, but he didn't feel like speaking. However, the woman clearly wasn't a smart person like Mo Lian or Duan Yu. She simply couldn't understand the little girl's gaze. She shuddered as she moved closer to the door. She stammered, Since you, miss, if there's nothing else, please leave first. Arbor glanced at her suspiciously. He looked at her several times until the woman's heart was about to leap out of her chest. Humph. The little girl pursed her lips in boredom and turned around to pass through the inner wall. This time, the woman finally saw clearly. No wonder this little girl was like a ghost and silently stood behind her. It turned out that she had passed through the estate's wall. Startled, the woman hurriedly got up and ran towards the inner court. Madam. The middle-aged woman ran to the entrance of the inner courtyard and stood there, repeatedly calling inside. The door to the side room was pushed open with a creak, and a pretty maid with a round face walked out from inside. She glared at the biddy and said impatiently, Why are you shouting outside the door? Don't you know that madam is busy? This old servant has something important to report to madam. I'll have to trouble Miss Kai Hui to inform them. The round-faced pan girl, Kai Hui, couldn't help but sneer when she heard this. If you have something to say, just say it to me. Madam doesn't have so much free time to see a doorkeeper like you. What's with the noise? A woman with a snow-white complexion and slender fingers walked out of the house. Beside her was a muscular man with a bare upper body. The biddy blushed slightly, and she promptly knelt down and saluted, Greetings, madam. This old servant has something important to report to madam. This old servant saw the crown princess just now. The originally indifferent madam of the State Security Bureau was abruptly startled, and her entire body tensed up reflexively. What did you say? Who did you see? Chapter 2968. The Crown Princess, the old woman hurriedly said. Then, she glanced at Madame Goen fawningly and said with a grin, But don't worry, madam. This old servant has already sent that little crown princess away. How did you send her away? Madame Goen sized her up suspiciously. The stoic-faced crown princess wasn't that easy to send away. Madame Goen vigilantly had the man beside her use his spiritual perception to search the surroundings. After confirming that there were no strangers lurking nearby, she sighed in relief. You did very well. Madame Goen nodded. Kai Hui, give her 5 spirit coins as a tip. Yes. The old maidservant took the reward and left while thanking her profusely. She even thought to herself, Fortunately, I saw that portrait in Madame's court before. That's how I recognized this stoic-faced young crown prince consort at a glance. Speaking of which, she had only caught a glimpse of her from afar. At that time, Madame was throwing iron darts in the small court, and there was a portrait hanging on the target. Later on, she secretly asked the old woman in the same area and learned who the portrait was. Fortunately, she had a good memory. If she continued to tangle with the little stoic crown princess, who knew what would happen in the future? Perhaps it would really arouse the suspicion of this stoic-faced crown princess, and she would come in to investigate regardless. If she ruined Madame's plans because of her, Madame definitely wouldn't easily forgive her. That old woman cracked a smile and continuously tossed a spirit coin in her hand as she left with a chuckle. However, she didn't know that not long after she left, a person appeared on the treetop. Arbor knitted his small brows tightly and raised his hand to scratch his small head. In truth, she originally didn't want to meddle in this matter, but she didn't expect Schwanschwan's crow's beak really hit the nail on the head. She had worn out iron shoes in a fruitless search, only to find it without any effort. Judging from Madame Gowen's sneaky behavior, she definitely didn't do anything good. Perhaps the Qin family's fifth young master and Ming Bao were abducted by this Madame Gowen. No one knew when she came to the Wind Thunder City. Her whereabouts were quite strange. She actually managed to hide from the Crown Prince's spies outside the Wind Thunder City. Arbor didn't know that the Madam of the National Security Agency had deliberately disguised herself before setting off for the Wind Thunder City. She kept a very low profile along the way and didn't cause any commotion. The carriage she used was also very simple. She didn't even use the main entrance when she left the imperial capital. If it weren't for the old woman's guilty conscience and dodging after seeing the arbor, she wouldn't have aroused Miss Chow's suspicion. Speaking of which, it was quite strange. Why did this Madam of the National Security Agency come to the Wind Thunder City instead of being a proper wife in the imperial capital? Did she catch fifth young Master Qin on the spur of the moment, or did she come here specially? This small courtyard was not very big, so Arbor only casually walked around the courtyard and found the fifth young master tied to the bed in a small room. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, Mr. Jojo wouldn't have known that the Madam of the National Security Agency had such a weird hobby. She liked to tie men up on the bed. What kind of hobby was this? Arbor glanced through the window and saw that the fifth young master's expression seemed to be in extreme pain. It was obvious that he had been drugged. Miss Chow blinked and associated it with the previous incident where she treated the fifth young master. Could it be that the filthy aphrodisiac powder was also administered by this talented Madam of the National Security Agency? Chapter 2969. Sir Jojo floated in through the window and silently arrived beside the large bed. Looking at Qin Xiu's pained appearance for a long while, he seemed to have thought of something and raised his head slightly. He felt a light bulb flash through his mind. Oh! No wonder Madame Guo of the Goan Madam called out young Sir Qin on the spot at the palace banquet last time when she gave her a beautiful dream. As it turned out, she was thinking of this fifth young Sir Qin back then. That wasn't right either. The little girl tilted her head and associated it with Madame Guo of the Goan Madam's disgraceful behavior back then. It seemed like she was doing something with several Qin young Sir Qin, not just fooling around with this fifth young Sir Qin in the fantasy realm. This Madame Guo of the Goan Madam wasn't afraid of dying from a loss of blood. When the little stoic thought of this, she couldn't resist pursing her lips in disdain. Fifth young Sir Qin abruptly opened his eyes, which were brimming with bloodlust and hatred. When his gaze landed on the little stoic, he was instantly dumbfounded. He thought his eyes were playing tricks on him, so he opened his eyes with all his might. When he discovered that expressionless stoic face was still standing at the head of her bed and looking at him, he couldn't resist saying hoarsely, "Save me, save me. 1,000,000 spirit coins and a stalk of tearless grass." The little stoic didn't have any extra expression on her face, and her tone was indifferent, as if she was making a deal with him. Fifth young Sir Qin was slightly taken aback, and then he nodded with all his might with reddened eyes. Arbor replied with an "oh" before reaching out to pull him up from the bed. The dagger in her palm directly chopped off several ropes binding him. Her movements were extremely rough, without the slightest regard for whether a person without any cultivation could withstand her strength. Qin Xiu couldn't describe his feelings. He actually knew from the start that this stoic face was a heartless and cold-blooded person. Back then, the reason why she saved him was because Physician Chung repeatedly begged her and even offered a large sum of money. Arbor lowered her head to glance at this fifth young sir before swaggering outside while carrying him. You were poisoned with 8 types of X drugs last time. Was it the Ministry of the Goen's doing? Fifth young Sir Qin's expression was rather indignant. He was a grown man, yet he was being held in her hands like a little chick. Not to mention that he couldn't get over his embarrassment, he couldn't bear it mentally either. Moreover, her extremely puzzled expression was a little glaring. He didn't believe that Ling Gu wouldn't have told her the truth when she saved him in Langfang previously. How could he have never mentioned the name of the Madam of the National Security Agency? It was obvious that she had forgotten. Or perhaps it should be said that she didn't take the matter of saving him, Fifth Qin, to heart at all. After she was done, she completely forgot about him. Seeing that he pursed his lips and didn't speak, Arbor didn't bother to ask anymore. Anyway, her relationship with the Qin family was just like that. The Qin family's fifth young master was a good-for-nothing. If he had the ability, he might be as bad as his second brother. Arbor felt annoyed as he carried him. When he exited the room, he coincidentally bumped into Madam of the National Security Agency. Madam Goen was so nervous that her whole body trembled. She subconsciously hid behind the strong man beside him. Subsequently, she felt that her cowardice was truly a bit outrageous. Why are you here? Madam Goen's voice resounded in the small courtyard. You're trespassing on private property. Arbor. Arbor sneered at her. If you're unconvinced, come fight me. Madam Goen instantly retreated several steps. Chapter 2970. Fuck. Madam Goen repeatedly cursed in her heart. However, when she recalled that damnable ugliness at the palace banquet last time, which caused her to not dare to leave the house for more than half a month, she inexplicably felt apprehensive when she saw Arbor now. This lass was truly sinister, so she really didn't dare to confront her directly again. Arbor, I'm warning you. Madam Goen inwardly shuddered and couldn't resist scolding. You immediately put him down. Let's go our separate ways. Hurry and leave, I'll treat it as if I never saw you. Before Madam Goen could finish her sentence, she was startled by Arbor, who suddenly flashed forward, and hastily retreated several steps. How can you be so shameless? Arbor expressionlessly looked at her and said, Fifth young Sir Qin doesn't seem to like you, so why do you keep pestering him? Madam Goen was so angry that her face flushed red, and she couldn't resist roaring, What the hell do you know? He's already mine now. Fifth young Sir is just shy by nature and isn't good at expressing himself. Arbor instantly loosened his grip, and Fifth young Sir felt like he was a pile of trash that the little girl threw away. When she peeked at him, it was as if she was looking at a pile of dirt, and she even hastily took out a small white handkerchief from her pocket to wipe her hands. Humiliation and anger instantly flashed past Fifth young Sir's eyes, and he exerted all his strength to move his limp limbs, but he felt powerless all over. Don't listen to her nonsense. Fifth young Sir couldn't help but panic when he saw the little girl's cold expression and how she was about to leave. He reached out to grab a ribbon on her skirt and struggled with all his might. She's talking nonsense. I don't know what the hell you two are doing. The little girl looked impatient and disinclined to care. You guys settle it yourselves. She still had to hurry and find her Lien, so how could she have the leisure to fool around with this bunch of idlers? Why you can't cough. I was caught by her. She caught me. Why you clearly know. Fifth young Master Qin was so infuriated that his entire body was trembling. He was infuriated at this young lady's aloofness and decisiveness, and he was also infuriated that he didn't have any cultivation and was just a piece of trash. He was like a fish on a chopping block, waiting to be slaughtered. Wah! He was so angry that he spat out a mouthful of blood, which formed a dark red puddle on the ground. The little stoic halted her steps and lowered her head to glance at him. When she saw that this person was truly so infuriated that his entire body was trembling, she couldn't help but pace back and forth in irritation. In the end, she still felt apologetic, so she bounced back and picked up the fifth young master again. The little stoic expressionlessly shouted at Madame Gua, "Scram!" Madame Goen was furious and couldn't help but curse, "Stoic face, do you really think I'm afraid of you? Men!" As soon as Madame Goen gave the order, 4 or 5 people who looked like secret guards immediately flew behind her. Arbor glanced at her and snorted. "You think you can stop me with just a few small fries? Aren't you too naive? What big words!" Madame Goen sneered coldly, "Take him down. Be careful of her poison." Arbor tossed fifth young Sir Qin to the side again and summoned that black feral from his conscience. Several small blue flames whizzed in the direction of the secret guards. Chapter 2971. A little spiritual master dares to be so arrogant in front of us. Before she could finish her sentence, one of the blue spiritual cleansing flames burned in front of Madame Goen. Madame Goen was enraged, and she waved her sleeve, wanting to brush away that leaping blue spiritual cleansing flame. However, that flame suddenly emitted sparks in front of her, and the intensity of the fire instantly soared. Caught off guard, Madame Goen jumped in fright. Fortunately, that robust man beside her was sharp-sighted and nimble, pulling her into his embrace and using his muscular arm to block that blue spiritual cleansing flame. Arbor focused her gaze and saw that black spirit armor had formed on that man's arm. The blue spiritual cleansing flame couldn't burn through this man's spirit armor and only wrapped around the outer layer for a few seconds before quietly vanishing. Madame Goen was unable to restrain her anger. She was a level 12 great spiritual master, but she was always so defeated in front of this little girl. This little girl clearly looked like a low-level little spiritual master, so why did she feel like her attacks were so swift and fierce? She couldn't help but feel a bit vindictive. Her desire to kill this little girl grew stronger and stronger. She was calculating. If she could kill this brat here without anyone noticing, she would be able to do so. It shouldn't be to the extent of being immediately discovered by the crown prince, right? As long as she acted quickly, ruthlessly, and accurately, she could send people to clean up the traces here afterwards. Madame Goen's gaze was ruthless and gloomy as she stared at Arbor and said word by word, "Immediately scram from this courtyard and treat it as if nothing happened, and I can still let you off." Fifth young Master Qin, who had been thrown to the ground by the little girl, couldn't stop trembling. He had already prepared for the worst, which was that the little girl would throw him away without a second word. In that case, he would have no way to survive. Rather than being humiliated by this hateful old woman, he might as well show his sincerity by dying. Miss Chiao responded to Madame Goen's words by slapping her across the air. This was simply fucking awesome. Fifth young Master Qin, who had fallen to the ground, looked at Miss Chiao in a daze. Then, he barely supported his limp body and crawled back a few steps. What a joke. When has my Arbor ever retreated without a fight? Sir Jojo's heart also burned with true fury. She couldn't be more clear about Madame Goen's gaze. This woman actually had killing intent towards her. Since that was the case, why should she be polite and talk nonsense with her? Just kill them. At this time, the anger and resentment in Goen's heart had reached its peak. That slap just now had really made her lose all her face. With the new and old hatred added together, the anger in Goen's heart burned fiercely. If he didn't do it, he would go all the way. He hardened his heart and shouted angrily, "What are you all standing there for? Get rid of this bitch right now." Everyone looked at each other and hesitated for a moment. They were well aware of the true identity of the little girl in front of them. Get rid of the crown princess. It felt good to make a move now, but what about after that? After the crown princess was taken care of, would things really end like this? After the crown prince lost his beloved wife, what terrible things would he do? When the time came, who would bear the consequences? One of the secret guards took a deep breath, cupped his hands and said to Madam, please reconsider. Now that His Highness the Crown Prince had the purple forest guard in his hands on the surface, who knew how many forces he had in secret? Could he easily act as he pleased? If the Crown Princess lost a strand of hair, His Highness the Crown Prince probably wouldn't take things lying down. Chapter 2972. Goen was usually a coward, but she was too angry today. She was so angry that she wanted to shed all pretense of cordiality with Arbor. Now that she was reminded by the secret guard, she also felt a little regretful. But the order had already been given. If she repeated it in 3 seconds, would she still want her face as Madame Goen? She turned her head and glared at the secret guard in front of her fiercely and shouted angrily, "Are you not even going to listen to my orders?" There was a hint of threat in her fierce eyes. Their lives were firmly in her hands. Don't forget that when they became secret guards, they had all handed over a wisp of their life souls to her. This also meant that no matter how high these people achieved in the future and how far they could go, even if they broke through the deity realm or even reached the transcendent realm, they would still only be her servants. She held all of their lives in her hands. If she wanted them to live, they would live. If she wanted them to die, they would die. This was no joke. Although the secret guard's face was covered, his body stiffened slightly. Madame Goen looked at them with a smug expression. "Why aren't you attacking?" The 5 secret guards surrounded Arbor and gritted their teeth. They could only accept the order and go forward to besiege her. Each of them summoned a large spirit beast beside them and pounced over without any explanation. Arbor's expression was calm. There was no anger. They were just serving their own masters. Since these people were working for Madame Goen, they naturally accepted her orders immediately. However, since they chose to attack her, she was not a good-natured person. She would show mercy and let them go. Since they were standing on the opposite side, then it was either you die or you die. Arbor looked coldly at these secret guards who had summoned their spirit beasts and rushed forward. She muttered, "Rustle, rustle." The soil under her feet immediately rolled up. For a moment, the ground that was originally paved with bricks bulged up. With that, a giant pincer suddenly emerged from the ground and snapped the neck of one of the spirit beasts. The secret guard who was closely related to this spirit beast did not understand what was going on at that time. He felt a surge of pain in his consciousness and spat out a mouthful of blood. His complexion also withered. Everyone's hearts were filled with shock. What kind of monster was this? It killed a spirit beast as soon as it appeared. What a powerful combat strength. The giant sand scorpion's huge head popped out from under the tumbling rocks. It waved its pincers and swept towards the limbs of a spirit beast next to it. The spirit beast was clearly frightened by its imposing manner. It spread its 4 hooves and cried out in alarm as it hurriedly ran out of the small courtyard. Arbor stared coldly at the people in front of him. He waved his hand and smirked. Everyone only heard rustling sounds coming from all directions, and an inexplicable sense of foreboding arose in their hearts. "What is it?" Madame Goen couldn't help but cry out, tightly clinging to the arm of the man beside her. "Scorpion, scorpion. There are so many scorpions." One of the hidden guards lost his composure and cried out in panic. Madame Gowan turned around to take a look. Goosebumps instantly appeared on her skin, and her scalp became slightly numb. Countless sand scorpions, each about the size of an adult's fist, crawled out of the small courtyard from all directions. Fifth young Master Chin's scalp also exploded. He was still sitting on the ground right now. What if these scorpions couldn't differentiate between friend and foe? Chapter 2973. As it turned out, Fifth young master was truly overthinking things. Seeing those little things swiftly crawling around him, Fifth young Master Chin's eyes revealed slight astonishment. It turned out that these scorpions could really distinguish between friend and foe. In reality, those scorpions might not be large in size, but each of them was a spirit beast that had awakened intelligence, so they naturally understood the giant sand scorpion's commands. Seeing that the scorpion swarm was about to spread to their feet, Madame Gowan started panicking. She tightly clutched the man's arm and shrieked, "What do we do? What do we do now? Madam, the situation is not in our favor. We had better retreat first." That man hastily said. What kind of joke was this? If they were caught in the scorpion swarm, who knew if they would be gnawed until not even a bone would be left? Madame Gowan was already panicking to the max at this time, so she nodded when she heard this. She directly pulled that robust man and turned around, abandoning her armor and leaving. The sand scorpion swarm engulfed several spirit beasts that were relatively slow to escape like a tide. After the scorpion swarm had spread, only a few spirit beast skulls were left on the ground. Miss Chiao stood in the middle of the scorpion swarm, looking indifferently at Madame Gowan, who had escaped in a crooked manner and had to activate several teleportation talismans in succession before finally escaping the scorpion swarm's encirclement. A cold glint flitted across her eyes. At this time, Madame Gowan was wiping her cold sweat as she heaved a sigh of relief while repeatedly panting. Thankfully, these things weren't too fast. They didn't catch up. The robust man nodded. Suddenly, his gaze fixed on the back of her neck, and he said in a slightly trembling voice, "Madam, don't move." "HM." Madame Gowan glanced at him in confusion. Seeing that his gaze was fixed on her, she couldn't help throwing him a coquettish glance. "Idiot, what are you staring at me for?" Madame Gowan glanced at her figure narcissistically, and she suddenly caught a glimpse of a small black snake from the corner of her eye. She turned around in horror. The little black snake, which had been lying softly on the back of her collar, suddenly raised its head and tried to bite her nose. "Ah!" Madame Gowan let out an extremely tragic shriek. Far away in the small courtyard, Fifth young Master Chin couldn't help but shudder slightly. The old woman's scream was too tragic. It was as if she had been stung by a bee's tail. Her scream was earth-shattering. Xiao Mu fished out some medicinal powder and sprinkled it among the small scorpions. Those scorpions seemed to be overjoyed, and they all swarmed forward, crawling in and out around Xiao Mu in layers. Fifth young Sir Chin couldn't help shuddering, only feeling that the little lady before him was simply abnormal. Miss Chow expressionlessly fed the little scorpions before returning them to Shaoji Planet. The giant sand scorpion crawled over and obediently lay down beside Arbor. The scorpion's head, which should have been very ferocious, now seemed to be engraved with the word obedient. When Fifth young Master Chin saw this scene, he couldn't help but raise his head again to glance at Arbor. Arbor happened to look in his direction and muttered, "Troublesome." He took a few steps forward and threw a bottle of liquid medicine on him. Fifth young Master spent a lot of effort, but he still couldn't pull the cork off that bottle of liquid medicine. It was truly because he had been on tenterhooks for most of the night after Madame Gowan brought him here, and he was mentally and physically exhausted. Chapter 2974. On top of that, he had been fed bone-softening powder and drugged with aphrodisiac earlier, so his body was already in a half-crippled state. Now, he couldn't even open a tiny medicine bottle. Fifth young Master Qin subconsciously clenched his fist tightly, not even noticing that his fingers had left bloody marks on his palm. Arbor glanced at this person in a bad mood and muttered, "Troublesome, again." The little fellow walked up and bent down to snatch that medicine bottle from his hand. She directly pulled out the cork and squatted next to him. She turned his flushed face around with one hand and very roughly poured the medicinal liquid into his mouth with the other. The Zither Shio's heart skipped a beat, and he felt that the little lady's ice-cold hand was actually a bit frightening. "Take half a bottle of antidote a day, and take it for 2 days." After Miss Chow expressionlessly said this, she picked fifth young Master Qin up from the ground. "Don't forget the 1,000,000 spirit coins and tearless grass." Fifth young Master Qin was filled with displeasure, and he raised his head with difficulty to glance at her. Why do you dislike me?" Because I'm a cripple." He could tell that the little stoic was completely blunt with him, and it could even be said that she simply couldn't be bothered to pay attention to him. This attitude was completely different from how she spoke to people like Qi Xianxian. Even though her eternally unchanging stoic expression seemed to be frozen in time, he could clearly tell that whether it was her conversational attitude or tone, it was vastly different from Qi Xianxian and the rest. "What does it have to do with me whether you're a cripple or not?" Miss Chow irritably retorted. She couldn't be bothered to meddle in their Qin estate's affairs. If she hadn't happened to run into them today, she wouldn't have gone to look for them at all. To put it bluntly, the Qin estate's 5th Qin and Ming province's Ming Bao had nothing to do with her at all. Arbor lowered his head to glance at the person in his hand and creased his brows in displeasure. So troublesome, he still had to carry this person back to the academy to exchange for mission points. Fortunately, this trip wasn't completely fruitless. At least, he managed to capture the naughty tree seed fragments. Just as Arbor walked out of the courtyard with 5th Qin, he bumped into eldest young Sir Qin, who had come after hearing the news. Eldest young master was stunned at first, but then he smiled like a flower and waved the small fan in his hand. My Jojo, it's a small world indeed. The two of us are really fated." Arbor rolled his eyes at him. He wanted to walk around him, but when he saw the person in his hand, he hurriedly threw him over. "I'll return it to you." Xiao Mu didn't say anything else and turned to leave after throwing him out. "Remember to settle the account by tomorrow." Fifth young Master Qin's complexion was a bit dark, and he only managed to stabilize himself after his eldest brother reached out to support him. When he turned around, he could only see the back of the little fellow's head. What a heartless and callous fellow. Fifth young Sir Qin gnashed his teeth and clenched his fists. All he could see was that bit of spirit coins. "Oh my Jojo, why are you running so fast?" Eldest young Sir Qin blinked, and his figure flashed as he caught up to Arbor's footsteps. Subsequently, he reached out to stop her. A chance encounter is better than an invitation. See, our fate isn't shallow. How about this, let's have a meal together. Who wants to have a meal with you? Arbor looked at eldest young Sir expressionlessly. I've been fasting recently. Impossible. Eldest young Sir shook his head vigorously. You can't do without 3 meals a day. Arbor. Chapter 2975. This person in front of her was really asking for a beating. Madame Jojo felt an itch in her little hands. As though he had seen through her intentions, eldest young Master Qin deliberately took a few steps forward and grinned in front of Arbor. Jojo, look. In any case, we're from the same star domain. Don't keep pushing me away like this. Humph. Arbor couldn't be bothered to say anything more to him and slid past him. Unexpectedly, she moved quickly, but this guy Qin Xian was even faster. No matter how she moved, he was like a hot potato that stuck to her hand and couldn't be shaken off. No matter how much she tried to get away from him, he always stayed by her side. The little fellow could see his grinning face when she turned around, and she couldn't resist swinging her little hand at his head. "What are you doing?" Arbor angrily threw a punch, but eldest young Master Cheen hastily reached out to block it. "Jojo, you saved our family's old fifth," eldest young Master Cheen said with a smile. "I have to show some appreciation, right?" "No need for appreciation." Miss Chiao waved her small hand. "Just settle the consultation fee you owe me as soon as possible." Eldest young Master Cheen silently twitched his mouth, and he turned to look at his pale-faced fifth brother. "Jojo, look at Xiu's current condition. It's not good. You can't leave him to die. Let's find a place to sit down and have a meal first, then you can treat him properly." Eldest young Master Cheen grinned and winked. "Don't worry. I won't shortchange you for a single cent of the consultation fee." Arbor glared at him when she saw that this person refused to let go and had a rascal expression that said, "I won't let you go until you treat my fifth brother." Eldest young Master Cheen smiled fawningly at her. "Jojo, let's go." Eldest young Master Cheen flashed to fifth young Master's side and nodded at him to support him. Old Fifth's health hadn't improved ever since he was drugged and tortured by that old fogey from the National Security Agency. He had taken plenty of medicine at home to recuperate, but the results weren't good. Now that he had the opportunity to grab little Jojo and show him to Lao Wu, it was naturally a good thing. Eldest young Master Cheen was very confident in Arbor's medical skills. The three of them left the alley where the villa was located and circled around to the street. They found a relatively quiet restaurant and walked in. Arbor checked Cheen Xiu's pulse expressionlessly and then said, "Just take the medicine I gave you on time." "Really?" Eldest young Sir Cheen sat on the side, propping up his chin with one hand as he gazed unblinkingly at the little stoic. He said with a grin, "Jojo, my fifth brother was previously assassinated by that old woman from the state security. You know how many kinds of drugs you have in your body." Fifth young Master Cheen's handsome face flushed red, and he turned his head to look at his big brother who didn't watch his mouth. Was he really his biological brother? Sir Jojo's face was cold. He sat upright and still and said expressionlessly, "I don't understand." Eldest young Master Cheen, fifth young Master Cheen glanced speechlessly at his elder brother. Eldest brother. Last time at Langfang, she was the one who helped. Eldest young Master Cheen turned to look at his younger brother. "Ah, that's right, Physician Chang also mentioned it to me last time. Xiao Xiao was the one who cured you in Langfang. Then that's it. Jojo must be very familiar with your illness." "Jojo, how do you think my fifth brother's illness needs treatment to be completely eradicated?" Chapter 2976. Arbor glared at him impatiently. "Why are you so long-winded? I already said that he only needs to finish taking the medicine I gave him, and he'll be completely cured. Why did he have to ask the same question again and again?" He was simply trying to find a topic to talk about. The little fellow felt that her saliva was about to dry up from explaining to this person. It was incredibly annoying. She picked up a cup of tea and took a sip before continuing expressionlessly, "The messy medicinal powder in your younger brother's body has already been neutralized, so it won't cause him any major harm in the future. On the other hand, his internal organs have accumulated quite a bit of cold, heat, and evil qi. It hasn't been accumulated for a long time. He should take more licorice and other things and train his body. He shouldn't look so weak that he'll be blown away by a gust of wind. Bones and muscles can all be trained. Even if he's just a mortal, it's essential to strengthen the body. If he's this weak, it'll be difficult for him to even leave behind a descendant. Could it be that he wants to be an embroidered pillow that looks good on the outside but is useless?" Cough, 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 cough. Eldest young Sir Chin choked on his tea and lowered his head to cough violently several times. On the other hand, fifth young Sir Chin, who was sitting on the side, was alternately stifled and agitated by Arbor's words. His pair of beautiful, moist eyes stared fixedly at Arbor, so angry that he was speechless. Not only was this young lady savage, but she also had a venomous tongue. She spoke for half a day and insulted him from beginning to end. One moment, she said he was weak, and the next moment, she said he was an embroidered pillow. She was openly and covertly insulting him. Also, she was a young lady, yet she talked about a man's descendant with an expressionless face. Didn't she think it was too much? Arbor glanced indifferently at the fifth young sir and took out a small box the size of a ring from his pocket. He pushed it in front of the fifth young sir and turned to ask the eldest young sir, "Do you have white maple in your family other than tearless grass? Take out some if you have it. This walnut pill isn't for sale to the outside world." The little stoic said expressionlessly, "It can nourish the blood, nourish the marrow, and strengthen the muscles and bones. It's suitable for you." In the end, she still wanted him to nourish his body. Was he that weak in her eyes? The fifth young master was so angry that he was speechless. Eldest young master's mouth twitched. He took out several herbs from his inner world and placed them in front of Arbor. The little stoic reached out to take them and unceremoniously accepted them all. She glanced at eldest young master and felt that she had taken many things from him. Then, she kindly asked fifth young master, "Do you want the dragon tendon bone repairing pill?" The fifth young master was enraged. Scram! On the side, eldest young Sir Chin couldn't help but cover his face. My God, his gentle and elegant fifth brother was actually angered by a little girl to the point of spouting such malicious words. There was really no one else like him, humph. The little stoic snorted coldly and then stood up to stride away. The eldest young master hurriedly stood up as well. He stopped the little girl and said with a smile, "Jojo, let's eat before you leave. Don't be angry. Things haven't been going well for our fifth brother recently, and he's not in a good mood. I'm in an even worse mood." Sir Jojo grumpily turned his small head away, but then his eyes suddenly lit up. He saw Mo Lien's figure appear at the restaurant's entrance extremely quickly and arrive in front of them in less than a second. Sir Jojo happily bounced to his side. "Lien, where did you go just now? You still dare to talk about it?" Mo Lien was enraged at the mention of this. Chapter 2977. That fragment little four was truly a good-for-nothing. Not only did he throw him out of the boundary, but he was also thoughtless enough to directly throw him out of Wind Thunder City. He made him run all the way back and even wasted some time. Arbor raised his hand to touch his handsome face that was somewhat frozen from the cold wind the entire way. Seeing his dark face, he couldn't help but ask curiously, "Where did little four throw you to?" "Outside the city." Arbor blinked. "Don't worry, I'll take care of it for you." Mo Lien nodded, feeling a bit angry when she thought of that swindler. Greetings to the Crown Prince. As soon as Mo Lien turned around, she met Qin Xian's spurious gaze, and she immediately became displeased. Why was this guy here? It couldn't be that he harbored some unrealistic thoughts about his wifey, right? Mo Lien reflexively grasped Arbor's small hand tightly. She looked at Qin Xian and Qin Xiu with a cold face, then her gaze paused on Qin Xiu, and she asked in surprise, "Jojo, you found fifth Qin?" "That's right." Arbor nodded his small head. "I found him by chance not long after we came out of the boundary." Mo Lien recalled Qi Xuanxuan's previous words and felt that her Qiao was indeed an extremely lucky person. "Jojo, then you can go to the mission center to exchange your points after we return." Mo Lien grasped his small hand. "Let's go back to the academy." Since they found him, there was naturally no need to stay in the inner city. Fifth young Master Qin pursed his lips and didn't say anything, but his gaze swept over Mo Lien very coldly. As expected, in these people's eyes, he, a good-for-nothing, was merely an item needed to provide mission points. The little stoic was greedy and sharp-tongued, but most importantly, she was vain. Looking at it now, this stoic face's taste wasn't that great. She probably followed the crown prince because of his noble status and wanted to curry favor with him. The little stoic was disinclined to care about what fifth young Master Qin was thinking. Her husband pulled her small hand, and the two of them walked towards the staircase. Qin Xian sighed and looked at the backs of the two people as they left. His gaze was somewhat complicated. I want to eat wontons. Mo Lien lowered her head and smiled at her. I'll cook it for you when we get back. Sir Jojo nodded. Suddenly, he thought of something and asked, by the way, did that holy Sun Mi Yen say when he will set off for the secret realm? 3 days later. Mo Lien smiled. Do you want to fuse with the fragment Little Four? Arbor shook his head. Let Little Four play for a while. Whether it wants to merge with Cho or not, it's up to it. Mo Lien raised her hand and stroked her little head. The Sun Moon Temple is near the Red River Canyon. We have to take the water route to get there. Just the Du Chenjiang alone will take about a day's journey. Flying is naturally prohibited above the Du Chenjiang. Arbor immediately looked at him curiously and asked, why is it prohibited from flying? Mo Lien shook his head. I don't know. It's been like this for years. Some people also say that it's because there are immortals in the river with boundless magic power living under the water. If cultivators who pass by dare to use their spiritual power to forcefully ascend into the air, they will be destroyed without a trace. Arbor curiously followed Mo Lien out of the restaurant, and the two of them headed for the Royal Academy. Before they could walk 2 steps, Arbor suddenly stopped and shouted, oh no, I forgot to bring my points back. What points? Wait for me. Arbor's figure flashed, and he once again returned to that small restaurant. Chapter 2978. In less than a few seconds, Arbor ran out with a person in her arms, and our dear Qin Xian chased after her, both amused and exasperated. Jojo, you can't be like this. Eldest young Sir Qin wordlessly followed after her and reached out to rescue fifth young Sir Qin, whose complexion had darkened. Prince Mo's handsome face also darkened, and he hugged the little fellow to his side while kicking fifth young Sir Qin in passing. In the blink of an eye, Qin Xian hastily pulled his younger brother back and dodged that kick. Then, he glared at Prince Mo and said irritably, Your Highness, my younger brother is only a mortal. How can he end up well after you kick him? Sir Qiao Qiao took a step forward and said seriously, Are you thinking of robbing our Sikong Star battle team's mission points? Qin Xian was even more speechless. No. Don't worry, you're the one who earned the points. I absolutely won't interfere, hey, no one's fighting with you over it. Arbor nodded and extended a fair and tender small hand with a serious expression that said, I have to bring the points back. If it weren't for the little stoic's expression being too serious, the 3 men would have thought she was joking. It turned out that this little fellow was serious. She seriously wanted to bring the points back to the academy. Mo Lien's eyebrows twitched, and she coughed lightly and said, Actually, 5th Qin only needs to report to the mission center after returning. There really isn't a need to trouble your dainty hand to carry him back to the academy. Lady Qiao Qiao blinked her eyes and retracted her hand. She then looked at the 3 of them with an expressionless face. Her face was serious and serious. Oh. If it weren't for his 5th brother's truly ugly expression, eldest young Sir Qin would have burst into laughter. This little thing was still so amusing. At this time, Arbor also realized that she had made a blunder, but her stoic face absolutely wouldn't let others see any trace of vexation. The next day, Lingu dragged a large cart full of spirit coins to the entrance of Donglin Garden. She instructed the servants to move boxes of spirit coins from the cart and pile them up in the courtyard. When Xiao Mu came out, she saw that the entire courtyard was piled up to the brim. The little fellow casually flipped through them and turned to look at Lingu, who was looking up at the sky. "Why did you send so many?" In terms of medicinal ingredients, eldest young master Qin Xian had given her enough yesterday. All that was left was 1,000,000 spirit coins. So, he decided to pay them off. At this time, the things piled up in her courtyard were priceless gems and jade wares, expensive calligraphy and paintings, precious lingji mushrooms, and so on. There were hundreds of spirit coin chests, which added up to about 4 to 5 million spirit coins. Arbor glanced at Lingu and did not say anything. He took the 1,000,000 spirit coins and turned around to leave. "Hey, wait a moment." Lingu couldn't help but call out to her. She pointed at the other chests on the ground and said, "These are all gifted to you by my young master, I only take what I deserve." Xiao Mu threw down this sentence and entered the room by herself, not paying any more attention to him. After Lingu returned with her head drooped, she told Fifth Young Sir Qin everything that had happened. Fifth Young Sir was so angry that the veins on his forehead were throbbing. This girl was pretending in front of him. She clearly loved money, but she didn't want it when he gave it to her. Fifth Young Sir was fuming inside. When Lingu asked him with trepidation, "Young Sir, how should we deal with these?" Fifth Young Sir sneered. "Burn them all." Chapter 2979. Although Lingu had a pained expression, since the young master had spoken, she could only do as he said. There were so many good things, such as lingji mushrooms and snow lotuses. The young master actually burned them all in a fit of anger. In the end, it was all that stoic-faced girl's fault. She should have just accepted them properly. Lingu secretly raised her eyes to glance at the fifth young master. Seeing him enter with a cold expression, the door to the side room was tightly shut with a bam. At the same time, in a private residence in the inner city, Madame Goen's ear-piercing curses could be heard. The maidservant Kai Hui pushed open the door with fear and trepidation. She was almost hit by a cup that flew straight at her. She quickly knelt on the ground and cried, "Madam, madam, please calm down. Why is it only you? Where's Kai Hui? Where did she go? I asked her to cook some bird's nest porridge. Why is she still missing? Is it because my words no longer have any effect now?" Kai Hui shuddered and quickly went forward on her knees to curry favor. "Madam, don't be angry. Later, Kai Hui will go to the small kitchen to take a look." "Why aren't you going?" Madame Goen roared angrily. Kai Hui shuddered and didn't dare to say anything. She quickly got up from the ground and walked backward to the door. "Wait," Madame Goen coldly shouted with a gloomy expression. "Yes, madam. Give me the bronze mirror over there," Madame Goen said again with a gloomy expression, unwilling to give up. Just now, she had already taken several kinds of pills to restore her appearance. Thinking about it, it should have taken effect by now. Kai Hui shuddered and quickly advised softly, "Madam, it's better for you to recuperate peacefully now, give it to me." Madame Goen's expression instantly changed, as if she was very dissatisfied with Kai Hui for daring to refute her to her face. Kai Hui quickly crawled over, took out a bronze mirror, and handed it to Madame Goen. Madame Goen took a deep breath and looked at herself in the bronze mirror. She almost fainted from what she saw. His originally tender and fair face was now darker than charcoal, as if he had been roasted in a furnace for several days. It was so dark that it was almost comical. He also had a big red nose with a black malignant tumor growing on the tip of his nose. It was as big as half a finger and was extremely conspicuous. Ah! Madame Gowan was so angry that she threw the bronze mirror to the ground and threw everything around her that could be thrown. She couldn't believe that even after her emergency treatment, her face was still affected by the poison. That damned little black snake. Of all the places it could bite, it actually bit her nose. Arbor, Arbor, I'm going to kill you, Arbor. Arbor. Mrs. Gowan screamed as she fell and hit the ground. Her hatred for Arbor had reached its peak. Kai Hui didn't dare to be rash. She stood to the side timidly, not daring to say anything. What are you waiting for? Invite the best alchemists and alchemists in the city. She wanted to treat her face. How was she going to go out and meet people with such a dark and poisoned face? Yes, yes. Kai Hui hurriedly got up from the ground and rushed out of the door. The current madam was really too scary. She could explode in anger at any time and vent the depression in her heart on any little girl. She didn't want to become that unlucky cannon fodder. Chapter 2980. 3 days later. Prince Zhang's estate, Princess Consort. A young maidservant with a long face and slender eyebrows quickly walked into the main hall and bowed to Shi Yongyan, who was sitting at the head of the table. How is it? Shi Yongyan used a wet handkerchief to lightly wipe the pastry crumbs from the corner of her mouth as she asked with an indifferent gaze. Prince has invited all the famous doctors in the imperial capital, saying that he wants to diagnose young Master Hua. That maidservant cleverly moved forward and lowered her voice to speak to Shi Yongyan. All the famous doctors are helpless. Shi Yongyan sneered indifferently and gently put down the teacup in her hand. She stood up and said, "Let's go to the Hua courtyard to take a look at second young master's condition." A moment later, Shi Yongyan had just stepped into the Hua courtyard with her maidservant Fu when they heard loud cries from inside, mixed with Su Shihua's father's angry yell. "Kong, are you just going to watch someone beat your younger brother like this? Who exactly is your biological brother? Don't you feel distressed seeing Hua, in such a half-dead state?" "No. Bring father into the palace immediately, I want to see His Majesty. I want to explain this situation to His Majesty." Su Shihua's father cursed. Why can he do whatever he wants just because he's the crown prince? How can he beat my Hua, into such a state? Ah, my Hua, Shi Yongyan's eyes revealed traces of mockery. This family was truly too amusing. There was actually such a brainless fellow who wanted to enter the palace to reason with His Majesty. "Father." Mo Shikong's tired voice came from inside the room. Shi Yongyan had someone push open the door forcefully. She strode in with her head held high and her back ramrod straight. "Prince, you wouldn't be so muddle-headed as to listen to your father's words and bring him into the palace to see His Majesty and plan to complain about His Highness the Crown Prince, right? Woman, do you have any manners? Why did you come in so rashly?" Su Shitao turned back from the bedside and glared at Shi Yongyan. She had never been on good terms with her sister-in-law. Ever since she, her parents, and her second brother came to the Jing Palace, she felt that she was under her sister-in-law's control. She even had to look at her sister-in-law's face when it came to food, clothing, and other necessities. This made her feel very unhappy every time. Mo Shikong looked at his wife unhappily. "Yongyan, what kind of attitude is this? Your Highness, honest words are unpleasant to the ear and beneficial to your actions. Please don't think that this concubine's words are unpleasant to hear." Shi Yongyan couldn't help but sneer. "If you insist on doing things your own way and insist on bringing father-in-law to the palace to complain, then you'll have no choice but to do so. I'm afraid that you will soon be implicated by your short-sighted father. What kind of person was His Majesty? How could His Majesty be in the mood to listen to you? Moreover, His Highness the Crown Prince was His Majesty's biological son, his biological son. What kind of father would not help his own son and even side with outsiders like them? So what if Su Shihua is dead? Could it be that their Jing palace was going to risk their lives against His Highness the Crown Prince for a mere Su Shihua? Wasn't this a joke? Shi Yongyan's gaze coldly stared at Su Shitao. Younger sister Tao, this matter was completely caused by you. You should properly reflect on yourself. You must not be so willful in the future. Su Shitao's eyes were red with anger. He stomped his feet and shouted, "Eldest brother." Mo Shikong also stared at Shi Yongyan with an unhappy expression. He discovered that she seemed to have changed into a different person today. Her words were blunt and very impolite, making him somewhat embarrassed in front of his parents and younger sister. Chapter 2981. Shi Yongyan sighed and bowed to Mo Shikong. She said faintly, "Your Highness, please don't mind this concubine's words. Honest words are unpleasant to the ear. This concubine is completely thinking for the sake of Your Highness. If today Your Highness brought father-in-law into the palace to complain to His Majesty, how do you think His Majesty will deal with this matter?" Mo Shikong pursed his lips and didn't speak. Although he didn't speak, his heart was clearer than anyone else. His Majesty certainly wouldn't say anything. His Majesty secretly loved his son so much that he even gave such an important elite force like the Emperor's shadow guards to the Crown Prince. This was the difference between close and distant relatives. No matter how much Mo Shikong sacrificed and did, in His Majesty's heart, he was different from Mo Lian. "Your Highness, we can only use medicine to protect young Master Hua's heart for the time being, and then find a way to help him recuperate," an old doctor who took Su Shihua's pulse said. He injured his natal meridians, and his skin was severely burned by the fire. No one can guarantee whether he can wake up or not. Mo Shikong's face was very ugly. In fact, the words of these old doctors were basically the same as what the old doctors of the Imperial Academy said. This meant that Su Shihua himself couldn't possibly recover to his original state. After all, if it was him, Mo Shikong, who spat out that golden dragon fire, even he might not be able to completely withstand it, let alone Su Shihua, who was extremely arrogant at such a young age. Su Shihua had always thought that his own cultivation was considered outstanding among his peers. Qiao Mu had surpassed him and even defeated him effortlessly, making him feel emotionally and physically that he couldn't accept it at all. "Your Highness, you also heard the doctor's words just now. I hope you will consider it carefully." Shi Yongqian lowered her eyes. After saying this, she walked out of the door with her servant girl, Fu Er. Su He and his daughter were left angrily staring at Shi Yongqian's back. "Eldest brother, look at what sister-in-law said. How can she push all the blame onto me?" Su Shitao suppressed his anger and said, "This matter was clearly caused by that crown princess. The reason why second brother became like this was also because of her." Enough. Mo Shikong didn't want to listen to Su Shitao's nagging anymore, so he turned to Su He and said, "Dad, you heard what Wang Fei said just now. Second brother's current situation is very bad. Forcing him to stay will only add to his pain." Su He wished he could slap his eldest son's face. He glared at Mo Shikong and shouted at him, "Are you going to leave me to die? It's not like your brother can't be saved. You want to give up the treatment? Father." Mo Shikong knew that with his second brother's current state, his father and the others would definitely cry, make a fuss, and threaten to hang themselves, causing the entire Jing mansion to have no peaceful days. His heart was stifled, but he still said, "Father, I don't want to give up either, but the problem is that it's useless even if I don't give up. Second brother's injuries have already spread to his entire body, and all his internal organs have been damaged. When Su Shihua's mother, Liang Shi, heard this, she started sobbing softly. The more Su He listened to the crying, the more annoyed he became. He shouted at him, "Shut up. In any case, you must do your best to save Hua. If you can't, then enter the palace and ask His Majesty for the best medicine and the best doctor." Su He said self-righteously, he was beaten by the crown prince. No matter what, His Majesty should do something. Chapter 2982. When Shi Yongyan received the news, she was almost angered into laughter by this naive eunuch's strange words. She really had the face to force her husband to go to the imperial palace to ask for a pharmacist and medicinal herbs. Could it be that the great emperor really didn't know that this had happened? The great emperor's spies were all over the divine continent. His Highness the Crown Prince had almost beaten Mo Shikang, this good-for-nothing younger brother of his, to death. How could the great emperor not know? The great emperor still hadn't said anything. What did that mean? That meant that he didn't want to care at all. It was hard for this Su He to keep saying that he wanted to go to the great emperor to complain. What did he want to complain about? He wanted to tell the great emperor, "Io, your son beat our Su family's child to death." It was simply ridiculous and brainless to the extreme. In front of Shi Yongyan stood two men in black who didn't speak with their hands hanging down. "Go." Shi Yongyan said faintly and put the porcelain cup in her hand on the table. A cold light flashed through her eyes. These two bodyguards trained by the Shi family were naturally very obedient to Shi Yongyan's words. The two people quietly came to Hua courtyard. Looking in from the side room's window, they saw Liang Shi crying and sitting by the bed to take care of her son. Su He and Su Shitao were no longer there. Zheng Wang should also be in the study at this time. One of them shot out spiritual power from his finger and pointed at Liang Shi, this ordinary person. Soon, they floated in through the window and saw Su Shihua lying on the bed like a charcoal on the verge of death. The two of them looked at each other, and then one of them nodded slightly at the other. They quickly walked forward and pulled up the brocade quilt that covered Su Shihua's body, and suddenly pressed it against his face. That bodyguard pressed one hand on Su Shihua's face. At first, Su Shihua didn't have any movement. Later, he slowly began to struggle. He was already burnt to a crisp. His breathing was faint and intermittent. If it wasn't for the doctors forcibly using medicine to keep him alive, he would have already died. At this time, with the brocade quilt on his face, he couldn't even breathe. Su Shihua struggled in the man's hands for less than a minute before he was completely powerless. After another 2 minutes, the Shi family's guard realized that his subordinate was completely motionless. Only then did he slowly loosen his grip and place 2 fingers on Su Shihua's neck to test him. He then turned around and nodded at the other guard. Not long after the two returned to report, before noon, Mo Shikang angrily came to Jing Yuan with a manservant called Xiao Bao to find her. As soon as Mo Shikang entered the room, he kicked the coffee table next to him and shouted angrily, "Shi Yongyan, did you do that to Hua?" Shi Yongyan looked at the man in front of her coldly. Princess Consort Jing was originally an average-looking person. In addition, her forehead was narrow and slightly sunken. Her nose was sharp and narrow, but her mouth was quite big. She was born with a mean and ungrateful appearance. No man would be satisfied with such a wife. If it weren't for the Shi family's wealth and influence, King Zheng wouldn't have been willing to marry such a wife. In the 3 years since the couple got married, they had always treated each other with respect. This was the first time the couple had met each other with red faces and thick necks. Mo Shikang looked at the woman's face in front of him and a trace of irritation and disgust flashed through his eyes. "Shi Yongyan, do you have no brain? Am I brainless, or is Wang Yi indecisive and doesn't know his limits?" Chapter 2983. Shi Yongyan looked at Imo Shikong calmly, but a complicated and disappointed look flashed across her eyes. She originally thought that the man she married was just not decisive in his actions, but now it seemed that he was simply soft-hearted and short-sighted. Ever since they found that disgusting family, King Zheng's residence had been in a lot of trouble. In fact, she really couldn't understand her husband's thoughts. In terms of blood ties, there was a slight connection. Blood ties were the deepest fetters that couldn't be severed from the beginning. But wouldn't it be ridiculous to talk about how deep blood ties were? King Zheng was an orphan since young. He followed Her Majesty the Empress from the age of 3 and was raised by her until he was a little over 10 years old. It could be said that King Zheng spent much more time with Her Majesty than Her Majesty's biological son, Mo Lian. Ever since Her Majesty's accident 17 years ago, the entire Divine Prefecture was in turmoil for a period of time. In recent years, Divine Prefecture finally became peaceful, and their days slowly became better. King Zheng had been thinking about it since a few years ago and began to search for his family. Family. Shi Yongyan couldn't help but snort. It was simply ridiculous. What kind of family was a parent who could abandon you without hesitation when you were fleeing for your life when you were young? Instead of saying that the Su family brought their children to the imperial capital to search for their family, it was better to say that it was King Zheng who sent people to find their family and then brought them over to provide for them. Shi Yongyan really couldn't understand how much affection could there be between these so-called family members who had never lived together since young. However, King Zheng was a stubborn person who was foolishly filial to the extreme. You sent people to deal with my second brother, and now you dare to say such things. Do you really think I'm afraid of your Shi family? Your Highness. Shi Yongyan stood up from the chair and looked at him coldly. Yongyan is doing this for your Highness's sake. That Su Shihua is already in this state, and your Highness still wants to waste manpower, resources, and energy on him. In the end, not only will it be a waste of effort, but it will also drag down our entire residence. You! What kind of situation does your Highness think our residence is in now? From 3 days ago until now, your Highness, have you calculated how many spirit coins and herbs you have spent on that living corpse? There are so many people in the residence, and the expenses are already high. Your Highness, you also know that ever since you brought second brother and third sister over, the palace's expenses have increased by several times. If it wasn't for this concubine using the dowry stores to supplement the budget, do you think this palace would be able to survive? This is the reason why you sent someone to deal with my second brother. Mo Shikong trembled with anger. In your eyes, is that money more important than my second brother's life? Princess Consort Jing used the handkerchief in her hand to wipe the corners of her mouth, and a cold smile appeared on her harsh face. Yes. The Prince of Jing raised his hand and was about to slap Princess Consort Jing's face. Princess Consort Jing raised her head and looked at him coldly. If Prince continues to let Su Shihua drag things out, the entire prince's estate will be dragged to death sooner or later. I'm just helping His Highness solve a big problem. Could it be that Prince will really listen to father-in-law's words and enter the palace to ask His Majesty for medicinal herbs and pharmacists for the sake of Su Shihua, this living dead? Everything this concubine does is for the sake of your Highness. Your Highness insists on going against the Crown Prince for the sake of the Su family. The gains do not make up for the losses. Chapter 2984. Presumably, Your Highness has clearly seen His Highness the Crown Prince's temper after this period of time. Do you really think that you will have a good time after falling out with His Highness? Shi Yongyan clenched her fists tightly and did her best to control the anger that was swirling in the depths of her heart. There had to be a limit to being brainless, right? Mo Shikong furiously glared at the woman in front of him and suddenly recalled the icy words Mo Lian left behind before leaving. Be Prince Xing properly. Be Prince Xing properly. Damn it. Mo Shikong felt repulsed, irritated, and gloomy. His identity as Prince Xing could really be removed at any time, right? Right now, Crown Prince Mo's words were like a sharp sword hanging over his head. It could drop down at any moment and snatch everything away from him, snatch it away. Mo Shikong had difficulty breathing, and his heart was so stifled that it was almost about to explode. He fiercely glared at Shi Yongyan before abruptly flinging his sleeves and turning to leave with large strides. If my parents ask about this matter, you can explain it to them yourself. Princess Consort Jing was so angry that she plopped down on the wooden armchair. Her chest heaved up and down as she panted heavily. In the end, it was her, the wife, who was in the wrong. Could it be that everything she did was not for the sake of Prince Zheng and Prince Zhang's estate? On Lady Jojo's end, she naturally did not know that after Mo Shikong brought Su Shihua back to the imperial capital, he went through a lot of trouble to find someone to treat him and caused a great commotion in Prince Zhang's estate. Even if she knew, she would probably just purse her lips and say, "It's a waste of effort." As for 7th Yen, this little fellow, although his dragon form was nothing special, his strength absolutely could not be underestimated. The little fellow was still in the late-stage infant stage and had yet to enter the growth stage. If he spat out a mouthful of blazing dragon's breath, he could definitely kill a level 15 great spiritual master. Lady Jojo was completely uninterested in what Prince Zhang's estate was up to. She, Mo Lian, Duan Yu, and the others were ready to set off early in the morning and arrived at the learning area plaza. Leading a row of white-robed priests, Holy Sun Mi Yen was already standing at the front of the square, on the most eye-catching arena. His white robe fluttered in the wind, and he had a compassionate expression on his face. It was as if he was shrouded in holy light just by standing there. Arbor secretly rolled his eyes, then turned to Prince Mo and whispered, "Did they say when they would depart?" Prince Mo knew that the little fellow was a little impatient, and could not help but secretly hold back his laughter, saying softly, "For this trip, other than the two of us, we will also select 30 people from the academy to go with us. We will probably only depart when everyone is present." Little Fatty, who was known for his information, squeezed his way forward and said, "Hey, I heard that there are more than 30 people from our academy." This time, the Sun Moon Temple was especially generous. Not only did they choose 30 people from our academy, but they also chose 30 people from our academy. It seems like they've even selected some students from other academies. In addition, they seem to have selected some people with special talents from the Divine Land and brought them along. Little Fatty rubbed his chin and muttered, "I suspect that this trip will definitely be dangerous. Is everyone here? Let's start the roll call now. Mu Roxuan. Gui Xuan. Long Min on the side," the little priestess added with a grin, "those whose names are called, please walk to the front." Chapter 2985. Zhongli Jiwei. Chen Baojia. The young men and women whose names were called each gracefully flew onto the large stage and stood still, their expressions rather complacent. But that was to be expected. To be able to break through the top 30 rankings in the previous arena competition, not only did they have strength, but luck was also indispensable. The little stoic expressionlessly looked at them. When Nether Leopard's name was announced, everyone was stunned and whispered to each other for a while. Soon after, they saw a person jump up from the back of the crowd like a monkey and rapidly run up the large stage. Excuse me. Thank you, excuse me." Ming Bao ran up the stage with a grin and cupped his hands at Chen Baojia, Zhongli Jiwei, and the others standing next to him. Chen Baojia swept him a glance and deliberately leaned closer to Zhongli Jiwei, muttering softly, "I wonder who he is. Everyone is outside looking for him like a net, but he's actually enjoying the show and doesn't mind it blowing up." Previously, everyone thought that Ming Bao was the same as fifth young Master Qin and was abducted while shopping in the inner city. In the end, reality proved that this guy had gone crazy from playing and forgot to return to the academy. Although the vice president had already harshly reprimanded him, the students who went out to look for him were all very gloomy and dissatisfied. They only felt that this guy was too unreliable and didn't know his limits at all. The students of the Divine Province and Sangzhou kept muttering in their hearts, as expected, an uncivilized place like Ming Province produces all these baffling talents. His Highness Yasi is coming down, someone called out softly. Everyone's gazes turned to the steps. Arbor and Mo Lian's group were standing in the front row, so Ming Yasi naturally saw them when he passed by. This was Miss Qiao's first time seeing Ming Province's crown prince after returning. Seeing that his complexion was a bit pale, as expected, he looked like he had just recovered from a serious illness. The strangest thing was that one of Ming Yasi's arms also seemed to be broken, and it was still tied up in a sling. Ming Yasi's gaze coldly swept over Mo Lian. Sir Jojo also couldn't resist raising her small head to look at her husband. Earlier, her husband had said that he had left behind a wisp of his divine soul and led a group of hidden guards to cause trouble for Ming Yas. Her husband also said that he would beat Ming Yas up to the point where he wouldn't be able to get out of bed for 2 or 3 days. Looking at it now, it was true. Although Yas could walk normally now, his arm was still broken. Judging from the state he was in 3 days ago, he might be in an even worse state. Jojo silently retracted his gaze and waited for the priestess to call the 30 students onto the stage. Holy Sun Mayan said reluctantly, "Crown Prince of Godly Land and Crown Princess, please come up." The little fellow held her husband's hand and stomped up the arena. She asked impatiently, "When are we leaving?" They were so long-winded and even held a roll call ceremony. The efficiency of the Sun Moon Temple was really bad. Holy Sun Mi Yen glanced at her with a fake smile. Then, he ignored the little girl's question and said in a deep voice, "In this trip to the Sun Moon Mystic Realm, there are dangers as well as opportunities. There are some things that I want to make clear to everyone before we leave. If everyone is willing to go to the Sun Moon Mystic Realm with the temple, please sign an oath first. I guarantee that if there are any dangers on this trip, I will take full responsibility. Our temple won't take any responsibility." Holy Sun Mi Yen said coldly. Chapter 2986. Sure enough, the Sun Moon Temple was crafty enough. They wanted to be a hands-off shopkeeper and not manage the accounts at all. Because among the people heading to the Sun Moon Secret Realm, there were the Crown Prince of the Divine Province, Prince Chen of the Tsang Province, and the Crown Prince of the Ming Province, as well as many outstanding disciples from large patrician families. It was hard to guarantee that if something happened to these people, the elders of their families wouldn't vent their anger on the temple because of these disciples. The Sun Moon Temple was naturally not that stupid, nor did they want to directly face the wrath of the emperors of the 3 provinces, so they thought of this method in advance. If they signed an oath, then they would naturally bear the full responsibility if something happened to them, and it would have nothing to do with the temple. Zhongli Jiwei's eyes flickered slightly, and then she said faintly, "In that case, even if we encounter danger in the secret realm, the temple won't lend us a helping hand?" Chen Baojia also couldn't help but chuckle. The temple truly has a good plan. Sir Jojo took the oath from the temple's priest and glanced at it before throwing it on the ground with a plop. Holy Sun Mi Yen was infuriated by the little stoic's attitude. Ignoring the priest's tugging, he turned to glare at Jojo. "What, you don't want to enter the secret realm? What kind of bullshit oath is this?" Qi Xianxian grumpily shouted from the side, "What do you mean by life and death in the secret realm, and the temple won't take responsibility if you encounter danger? And this. Those who enter but aren't disciples of the temple can only choose to bring out one secret treasure when they come out of the secret realm. The rest of the treasures must be handed over to the temple. Bah! You're so shameless. Qi Xianxian rolled her eyes and snorted. You want to find people to work for your temple again, but you won't give them any benefits. No one is a freaking fool. Holy Sun Mi Yan's face darkened, and he said indifferently, after entering the secret realm, life and death are naturally up to fate. This time, the temple isn't only bringing in 32 Royal Academy students. In addition, there are also dozens of students from several different academies in the 3 provinces. In addition, we have recruited many talents from Ming Province, the Divine Province, Tsang Province, and even several large tribes outside the 3 provinces to enter the secret realm together. After entering, everyone must temporarily obey orders until we give everyone time to act separately. This is not an oath written specifically for a student of the royal school. Holy Sun Mi Yan says coldly, instead, every non-believer of my shrine has to sign such an oath before entering the secret territory. In other words, if you don't want to sign, then don't go. Everyone had spent so much effort and finally obtained a precious spot. How unwilling would they be to give it up now? Bullshit. The little stoic said indifferently, and everyone's gazes uniformly shifted to her. The little fellow was too lazy to speak, so she tugged at her husband's sleeve. Mo Lian didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but she still said, the 2 of us are using our spots to exchange for the life of your holy maiden. Don't forget. This oath is not an oath. We will not sign it. Mo Lian said indifferently, if you don't bring us in, then hand over your holy maiden. Emichim, kill her. Arbor nodded his small head and said seriously. Holy Sun Mi Yan was so infuriated by these 2 that his heart and lungs hurt. Chapter 2987. The rest of the people looked at the Divine Land Crown Prince and the Crown Princess with a strange expression, and they secretly glanced at Holy Sun Mi Yan's face. Arbor would be stupid to sign that oath. It was clearly written in the oath that she had to hand over all her treasures, and only one could be kept. Bah! How could she hand over the treasure that was in Sir Jojo's pocket? That was just bullshit. Although she wasn't sure if this oath would have any binding effect on her galaxy. Why would she take the risk? She and her lotus were the 2 places that the people of the Divine Hall used to buy the lives of the holy nun. She had to figure out what a bunch of muddle-headed guys were thinking. Holy Sun Mi Yan glared at Arbor angrily. After a while, he squeezed out a few words from between his teeth. Isn't the matter of the holy nun already over? Little Crown Princess turned hostile and stared coldly at Holy Sun Mi Yan, saying, I don't want to turn the page now. What can you do to me? You! What a load of nonsense. Shut up. Arbor roared at him impatiently, and then shouted into the air, where are the guards of the Crown Princess? Everyone twitched the corners of their mouths inexplicably. Bam! 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 Several figures immediately flew out from their hiding places and stood in a row behind Little Crown Princess. Go and return the mining rights contract of Chess Mountain Spiritual Mine to the Divine Hole. By the way, capture that Yaoguang holy nun for me, the Crown Princess. I, the Crown Princess, want her to die right now. Yes. Qi Xianxian, Duanmu Qing, and the others expressed their helplessness at the same time. Their Lord Qiao Qiao was truly a strange little fellow. She could really turn hostile without any hesitation, and didn't care about Holy Sun Mi Yan's old face at all. Holy Sun Mi Yan only felt that the anger in his chest was about to erupt like a volcano. He looked around and saw that the other 30 people on the stage didn't say anything. Instead, they were all looking at him as if they were watching a show. It seemed that regardless of whether or not any of them had any grudges with the Little Crown Princess, everyone's thoughts were the same at this moment. They were all standing by the side of the little crown princess who had turned hostile. Holy Sun Mi Yen took a deep breath. Call them back. Seeing that those one-track-minded hidden guards were really going to capture Yaoguang Saintis, Holy Sun Mi Yen was so furious that his lungs were about to explode. His mouth trembled as he couldn't help but roar. What? The two of you are under special circumstances, so you don't have to sign it. However, the others, oath. Xiao Mu hollered at the flabbergasted young priest. The priest's hand trembled, and he quickly handed a new oath to Arbor. The little stoic expressionlessly skimmed through it again. Then, she took out a cinnabar brush from her inner world and circled a few words on that oath before making a cross. You can be responsible for your own life and death, but the others must move together with you and listen to your commands. There's no need for bullshit like that. After entering the secret realm, each of you will act separately. If you can, then you can. If you can't, then go and capture that Yaoguang Saintis. What are you waiting for? Enough. Holy Sun Mi Yen tore off that refined and noble appearance of his and roared furiously, if you want to act separately, then so be it. Do you think that the temple has to go with you? You can only take one treasure from the secret realm. This condition absolutely couldn't be reduced. End of the 6th watch. Chapter 2988. Arbor pursed her small lips and looked at the red-faced Holy Sun Mi Yen. She humphed and said, ridiculous. She had to argue with Sir Jojo until her face turned red. It was truly too boring. Sir Jojo originally didn't want to insult her, but she had to come to her and beg to be insulted. Holy Sun Mi Yen's chest felt stifled, and he didn't want to continue looking at the little stoic. After everyone successfully signed that oath, Holy Sun Mi Yen couldn't resist looking at Arbor and Mo Lien. The more he looked, the more he found them pleasing to the eye. These two people didn't sign an oath, so they naturally weren't bound by the laws of heaven and earth. If they found more than one treasure in the secret realm, wouldn't that be letting these two people off easy paw? Holy Sun Mi Yen immediately tossed this thought to the back of his mind. How could they have such great luck? It was already pretty good to be able to find one or two treasures in a secret realm filled with traps. Although these two people's cultivations weren't bad, there was no guarantee that they wouldn't be abused by the secret realm's traps, formations, and spirit beasts. Humph. Holy Sun Mi Yen held his head high and plastered that holy and haughty mask on again. He said gravely to everyone, since no one has any objections, then let's prepare to set off. Our first stop is the Great North-facing Forest's Northern Transportation Formation. Holy Sun Mi Yen took out a large air transportation spiritual tool and summoned everyone onto it. This air transportation spiritual tool's appearance was a bit like a scabbard and could accommodate about 40 people. There were 32 students in the academy, plus the Holy Sun Mi Yen and a few priests. There were 39 people in total. Therefore, it was quite crowded inside. Sir Jojo expressionlessly sat in the innermost corner with her hands on her knees. She sat obediently next to her husband in a very upright sitting posture. When the air transportation spiritual tool started, it jolted slightly. Zhongli Jiwei's gaze swept over and saw His Highness the Crown Prince instantly reach out to support the little Crown Princess' soft waist. It was so sore that a mouthful of sour water was stuck in her chest, unable to move up or down. Damn it! Did this couple have to be so lovey-dovey? The little Crown Princess was sitting upright. Could it be that she would fall from the air transportation spiritual tool's jolt? The Crown Prince's attention was always on that woman. She was so angry that her chest hurt. Arbor felt a strong gaze directed at her. She raised her head in displeasure and looked at Zhongli Jiwei with a frosty gaze. The corners of the little fellow's mouth curled up into a cold smile. Zhongli Jiwei felt a chill in her face, and her body couldn't help but tremble slightly. Chen Baojia, who was sitting next to Zhongli Jiwei, hurriedly gave Arbor a very stiff smile and then pulled Zhongli Jiwei's sleeve. Everyone on the air transportation spiritual tool sat there with different thoughts in their minds. Some of them secretly looked at Arbor and Nimo Lian, while others looked at each other and whispered to each other. In any case, the students had successfully set off on their journey. Before they left, Principal Yun looked at them kindly and reminded them kindly, everyone must remember that you only have one life. Treasures were indeed good, but life was even more precious. Don't put yourself in danger because of some worldly possessions. Sir Jojo sat for about 5 minutes, then took out an orange from his inner world and pulled his husband's sleeve. Mo Lian couldn't help but smile. She reached out to take the orange and peeled it with a smile. The little guy was, in fact, a foodie. Chapter 2989. Even though she had never admitted this point. But reality proved that as long as the little fellow was idle and had nothing to do, she would always be holding snacks or fruits in her hands. What did she like to eat when reading books? What did she like to eat when watching competitions? Even when she was training, she never forgot to eat after coming out of closed-door cultivation. The first thing she did was expressionlessly look for food. Mo Lian snickered inwardly. After perfectly peeling an orange, she handed it to Sir Jojo. Sir Jojo accepted it expressionlessly. Qi Xianxian, who was sitting on the other side of her, silently twitched her mouth. Jojo, this little foodie, was seriously a bit adorable with her stoic expression. Sir Jojo glanced at Qi Xuanxuan's odd expression from the corner of his eye and took out another orange from his inner world and handed it to her. The two of them started eating in the last row. After finishing the orange, they switched to a banana. After finishing the banana, they took out some dried fruit and started nibbling on it. Then, they took turns eating pastries and candies. In the end, they even started munching on melon seeds. Duan Muqing, and the others, who were sitting in front of them, all twitched their mouths as they secretly suppressed their laughter. These two girls, they were completely treating this as an outing. Holy Sun Mi Yen finally couldn't take it anymore and said, "Set the table." Those two words were sonorous and forceful, almost causing people to choke with laughter. Although Lord Holy Sun's cultivation had reached the spiritual venerable realm, he was used to eating 2 meals a day. So in essence, Lord Holy Sun was also a bit of a foodie. If he wasn't in closed-door cultivation, he would eat every day. Because it was a bit crowded with 39 people, it was completely impossible to set up a small table from the side. Hence, the white-robed priests sat around Lord Holy Sun, each of them holding a bowl of food and handing a bowl of rice to Lord Holy Sun. They silently watched Lord Holy Sun eat gracefully and unhurriedly like this. Sir Jojo glanced at him and silently took back the pile of snacks. He took out his all-purpose food box from his inner world and took out a large pot of fresh fish soup. He also took out 3 to 4 plates of stir-fry and had Duan Yu, the little fatty, and Duan Muqing turn around to carry them for him. Jojo, Sama started eating expressionlessly. Qi Xuanxuan's mouth twitched. She stuffed a mouthful of rice into her mouth and almost burst out laughing. The little fatty hurriedly reached out to cover her mouth and cried out, Don't spit, we still have to continue eating later." Mo Lian was so amused by the little guy that she was about to cramp up. This little stoic had always been expressionless, but inexplicably, her entire body was brimming with comedic talent, making people want to smile knowingly. Holy Sun Mi Yen chewed the food in his mouth without tasting it. He only felt that his nose was filled with the aroma of the fish soup and all kinds of stir-fried food. He lowered his head and looked at the rice, steamed buns, and a plate of cold frozen duck meat in his bowl. That plate of frozen duck meat was old and dry. He instinctively wanted to throw it away. Kacha! Holy Sun Mayan was so angry that he broke the chopsticks in his hand. Seated behind the saint, eldest young Master Qin couldn't help but rub his forehead. Why the hell did he have the urge to burst out laughing? How many spirit coins? Holy Sun Mi Yen suddenly spoke. He just couldn't understand. They both came out for training, so how could that neurotic little stoic still take out warm food? Chapter 2990. Just how freaking much of a foodie are you to be able to store so much food in your inner world? The little priest next to Sir Holy Sun cautiously reminded, Sir, that stoic face often sells at exorbitant prices. Our family really doesn't need to spend so many spirit coins to buy that stoic face's sky-high price dishes. Pfft, the two young masters of the Doe family couldn't help but stifle their laughter. In reality, the two of them had wanted to laugh since the beginning, but because they had to take Holy Sun Mian's face into consideration, they endured with great difficulty. At this time, Sir Jojo had already eaten his fill. He took that pot of fish soup from Duan Yu and held it himself. Then, he handed him a clean pair of chopsticks and a bowl of rice, indicating for him to eat. Hearing Sir Holy Sun's inquiry, the little stoic expressionlessly said, "One pot is 200,000 spirit coins. A small bowl is 20,000 spirit coins." Pfft, cough cough cough, cough. Before Qi Xianxian could spit out the rice in her mouth, she was hastily stopped by the quick-witted little fatty. "Don't spit on Ancestor Xianxian, don't spit." They still had to continue eating, big sister. Holy Sun Mi Yan's expression was dark and gloomy. He stifled for a long time before saying, "Your price is even more expensive than the sky-high holy rice sold at Dragonflame City's Kaidai veranda." Arbor aloofly looked up at him like he was looking at a pauper. "You can't afford it, so what are you asking for?" It was simply a waste of her saliva. Everyone, the little priest couldn't resist secretly reminding Sir Holy Sun, "Sir, actually, we don't have to talk to the little stoic." Was there something wrong with this Holy Sun? Why did he have to tease and talk to the stoic face? Every time, he would be angered to the point of vomiting blood. Wasn't he sick? Smack. The Holy Sun coldly ordered after slapping that priest's head, "Shut up." "Give me a small bowl," the Holy Sun said furiously. Everyone couldn't resist wanting to laugh. The little stoic expressionlessly filled a bowl of fresh fish soup for Sir Holy Sun and had Lu Yu pass it over. The Holy Sun took a sip and immediately sensed the difference. This fish soup felt like it was freshly cooked in a restaurant. He could taste its fresh aroma, and his tongue felt like it was about to melt. Compared to his lukewarm rice, this bowl of fresh fish soup was a little hot. After the saint finished his bowl of fish soup, he turned his face away and stopped talking. Over at Duan Yu's place, they took turns eating lunch in threes before finally stopping. Arbor put away the bowls and chopsticks and let the diligent Cho-Cho wash them. The saint suddenly asked with a cold face, "Do you have steamed buns for sale?" It turned out that the saint had not eaten his fill. The saint added, "The kind that's piping hot, 500 spirit coins for one bun. You should become a robber, it suits you better." Everyone ridiculed inwardly. Subsequently, they heard eldest young Master Qin say, "Give me two." When he turned around and saw Qin Zhou looking at him with a pitiful expression, eldest young Sir Qin choked and hastily said, "Give me 4. 6, Omega Kotoku said calmly. Eldest young Sir Qin silently took out his money pouch and took out 3,000 spirit coins to give to the little stoic in exchange for 6 piping hot meat buns. The stoic face expressionlessly put away the money and took out a pot of spiritual tea from her inner world, pouring a cup for Mo Lien, Duan Yu, and the others. Sir Holy Sun, who was currently chewing on a meat bun, couldn't resist the urge to spit at her. "I bought your steamed buns, so you should also give me a cup of tea." Chapter 2991. eldest young Sir Chin twitched his mouth. According to his understanding of the little stoic, this Sir Holy Sun was clearly looking for trouble again. 1 cup of spiritual tea is 10,000 spirit coins. 3 cups. Eldest young Sir Chin decisively paid again, attracting the gazes of the Gu family's Gu Yishuan and the others like they were looking at an idiot. 4 people in their cultivation realms, what could they do if they didn't eat or drink for several days and nights? Did they have to buy the exorbitant price of the stoic face's tea and rice here? The eldest young Sir blinked and said with a grin, I just love to see the little stoic's mischievous appearance when she scams people. Everyone, based on his understanding of the little stoic, although she didn't have much of an expression right now, she should still be quite happy on the inside. She was happy. It was worth it to spend some money to make the stoic face happy. Young Sir Omega Kotoku silently accepted a cup of spiritual tea. After taking a sip, he was slightly startled. Sir Holy Sun angrily flung 20,000 spirit coins at the little stoic. 2 cups. His liver was on fire, and 1 cup was simply not enough to fill the gaps between his teeth. Gu Yishuan looked at these people as if they were lunatics. Sir Holy Sun definitely had a serious problem. He didn't get along with the little stoic, but he just had to stick close to her and look for trouble. They had similar temperaments, but every time he was angered by this stoic face, the veins on his forehead would bulge. They didn't look like friends at all. 10 cups. At this time, another person spoke up. Everyone turned to look and saw that the one who spoke was Ming Province's crown prince, Ming Yasi. Akir twisted the handkerchief in her hand with a slightly distorted expression. She looked like she couldn't sit still and kept glaring at Jojo. In reality, most of the people who originally forked out money to buy the spiritual tea did so in order to make the little stoic happy. Unexpectedly, they immediately felt something was wrong after taking a sip. This really wasn't some ordinary tea. It really was spiritual tea. After Sir Holy Sun finished drinking a cup, he actually muttered to himself, there's a reason why it's expensive. This spiritual tea was simply worlds apart from the ones he had eaten in the past. Sir Holy Sun couldn't resist looking back at the little stoic. At this time, the little girl was completely silent. She leaned against the last row and flipped through the yellowed ancient book in her hand, reading page by page. Qi Xianxian was currently wiping her purple-like treasured sword and caressing it lovingly. 2 days ago, Prince Mo returned the newly forged weapons to Qi Xianxian, Duan Muqing, and the others. Everyone's hearts were filled with amazement. In such a short period of time, the Crown Prince was able to refine all 7 weapons to such perfection. Duan Muqing's Emerald Misty Sword was actually refined into a level 15 divine weapon by Prince Mo. It was simply breathtaking. As for the weapons in Qi Xuanxuan's and the others' hands, they had all been refined to the next level. This time, they were all grade 10 god artifacts and above. Mu Roshuan's face darkened as she sat silently in the corner. Ever since she returned to the academy 2 days ago, she had maintained this state of silence. She didn't want to talk to anyone, and she didn't have the slightest interest in talking to anyone. At this time, looking at Ming Yasi, who was sitting 2 seats in front of her, her gaze flickered unexpectedly, and her heart was filled with displeasure. When she recalled her mother Mu Qingya's reminder, she felt a burst of irritation for no reason. She didn't have any feelings for Ming Yasi at all. She wouldn't leave her future fate in the hands of a strange man like this. While the little stoic was busy eating, Mu Roshuan merely watched coldly from the sidelines. Chapter 2992. Now that she had calmed down, he couldn't resist glancing at her. For some reason, he didn't feel anything when he saw this stoic face in the past, but recently, the more he looked at her, the more vexed he felt. He felt that this girl was very pretentious no matter what she did, as if she was a source of light. Just sitting there and quietly reading a book always attracted people's attention. Bam! All of a sudden, a huge force slammed into their flying spirit tools, causing them to jolt slightly and dive forward. The little stoic, who was holding the book in her hand, was caught off guard and almost rolled out. Mo Lien was quick to react and quickly reached out to grab his wife, pulling her back to sit next to him. Meanwhile, Duan Yu, who was sitting in front of the little stoic, had already turned around and reached out to support her. The little stoic sat upright and still with a taut face, pulling back Qi Xianxian, who almost rushed out, with her small face taut. Qi Xianxian cursed under her breath and raised her hand to rub her chest. On the other side, Zhongli Jiwei and Chen Baojia weren't so wonderful. They were knocked a few steps forward by this sudden force and crashed into the people sitting in the front row. Zhongli Jiwei was fine, but when she crashed into Dark Yossi, she was forcefully pushed back by the shrieking Akir and glared at several times. Chen Baojia was even more unlucky. She flew into the stocky Ba Shu's back and was pulled into his embrace by the laughing boorish man. Ba Shu's bearded face magnified infinitely in front of her eyes. Chen Baojia even felt that man's large palm pinching the soft parts of her body. Chen Baojia shrieked and raised her hand to slap Ba Shu's face without thinking. A level 9 spiritual cultivator like Chen Baojia's slap was no different from scratching an itch to the level 12 great spiritual cultivator Ba Shu. Ba Shu grabbed her hand and used his arm to clamp her slender waist. He teased, "Little sister Baojia, you were the one who threw yourself at me. Why are you hitting me?" At this moment, something was ramming into their air transportation spiritual tool with great force. Everyone on the air transportation spiritual tool was caught off guard and knocked around. Who would have the time to care about Ba Shu and Chen Baojia? Taking advantage of the turbulence of the flying spirit artifact, Ba Shu deliberately pushed Chen Baojia to the left corner and pressed his body against Chen Baojia's chest. With a teasing smile on his face, he purposely rubbed his body against Chen Baojia's soft body. Ba Shu's beady eyes were filled with lust as they rubbed against each other fiercely. "Ah!" Chen Baojia's voice trembled as she screamed. Her long hair was disheveled as she looked towards Prince Mo. Her eyes were filled with hope and a plea for help. Who on the Crown Prince's side would care about her? The few of them were so shaken that they could barely sit still. Duanmu Qing summoned the emerald misty sword and pierced through the flying spirit tool that had opened a small gap. With a chi-la sound, the ear-piercing cry of a large bird came from outside. Holy Sunmi Yan's face completely darkened. He leaned against the window and took a look. A flock of birds. They're all level 4 or level 5 spirit beasts. Don't be nervous. Stabilize the flying spirit tool first. Don't panic. Holy Sunmi Yan said. Chapter 2993. His words were directed at the little priestess, who was controlling the flying spiritual tool. The little priestess's face was a little pale. She pushed the control panel back and forth, trying to stabilize the flying spiritual tool so that it could continue flying. However, there were countless birds blocking the path ahead of the air transportation spirit artifact. Looking out of the control panel's window, he could only see birds crashing into their air transportation spirit artifact non-stop. He couldn't see the road ahead at all. Prince Mo reached out and carried Lord Jojo onto his lap. Lord Jojo sat there obediently. His black eyes rolled around, and he silently took out a small porcelain bottle from his sleeve. Mo Lien immediately reached out and took it. She waved her hand and opened the left window a little, and the porcelain bottle between her fingers bounced out. The porcelain bottle instantly shattered, and the powder inside floated out. After killing several birds that had rushed in, the window was closed again. The flock of birds outside seemed to have gone crazy. After bumping into the flying spiritual tool a few more times, they suddenly began to kill each other. Outside, dark feathers flew chaotically for a while. Soon, the flock of birds' numbers plummeted because of the infighting. The little priestess, who was controlling the flying spiritual tool, finally saw a little of the road. Her fingers pressed on the control panel a few times, and she hurriedly drove the flying spiritual tool out of the flock of birds in front of them. The air transportation spiritual tool jolted heavily, and Chen Baojia's scream was blocked by a big mouth with a strong smell. Her breath was stuck in her throat, and she could only let out a few muffled screams. Her eyes were filled with horror as she looked at the bearded man who was wantonly touching her body. Chen Baojia was anxious, angry, and hateful. She was angry because no one helped her. She was anxious because her chest felt cold, and the cloth on her body seemed to be getting thinner and thinner. She hated that her cultivation was too low. Her body was tightly bound by the rough man in front of her, and she couldn't break free for a while. In the chaos, she was pressed into a corner by a rude man who was molesting her in front of everyone. Chen Baojia's tears kept rolling in her eyes. She turned her face left and right, trying to avoid the man's mouth. Ba Shu, on the other hand, was aroused by her. He couldn't stop caressing her body. It wasn't until the flock of birds had retreated and the flying spirit artifact had stabilized that Ba Shu finally let go of Chen Baojia's body with a wicked smile. Then, he said to her in a low, rough voice, "Next time, don't throw yourself at a man so casually. Not everyone is as polite as I am." Chen Baojia was so angry that her lungs were about to explode. She got up and raised her hand to throw it at Ba Shu's face. However, she didn't expect that the air transportation spiritual tool would shake violently again, causing her to stumble and fall into Ba Shu's arms. Ba Shu teased her as he reached out and grabbed her waist, rubbing a certain part of his body against hers. Chen Baojia's tearful little face suddenly stiffened, and her body couldn't help but tremble with anger. Shameless, shameless bastard. She was a pure and unmarried girl, yet she was being teased like this. Now, no one had the time to care about those two people. Holy Sunmi Yen said with a calm face, "Everyone, pay attention. The air transportation spiritual tool is about to fall. Open the spirit artifact cabin and let everyone down." It seemed that the flock of birds had damaged the air transportation spiritual tool, so everyone had no choice but to fly off the air transportation spiritual tool first. Fortunately, the flock of birds had already been dispersed. Prince Mo hugged Sir Jojo, and the two of them were the first to leave the damaged air transportation spiritual tool. Soon after, Duan Yuk, Duan Muqing, and the rest also jumped down. The 6th watch ended. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.